Hello guys, welcome to Percy Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Percy read the Naruto Summon 20 Girl for Harem? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Scroll Beneath the Waves. The Mediterranean gleamed like liquid sapphire under the afternoon sun as Percy Jackson cut through the water with practiced ease. 50 feet below the surface, the pressure barely registered to his sea-attuned body. Being the son of Poseidon had its perks, and complete freedom underwater remained his favorite. Just another normal vacation, he muttered to himself, bubbles escaping from his mouth as his words carried clearly through the water. No quests, no prophecies, no world-ending threats. At 19, Percy had earned this break. 2 years after the giant war, he'd finally convened himself to take Annabeth's advice and enjoy some peace. A solo diving trip off the Greek coast seemed perfect, reconnecting with his father's domain while exploring ancient shipwrecks. Something pulsed at the edge of his senses. Like a heartbeat beneath the sand. Percy frowned, changing direction to follow the sensation. The seafloor sloped down into a narrow trench where crushed amphora and corroded bronze littered the sand. An ordinary diver might have seen a common shipwreck, but Percy sensed something else, power, ancient and contained, calling to him. The pulse grew stronger as he ached a section of sand that seemed no different from the rest. But to Percy's enhanced senses, it practically glowed with energy. He hovered his hand over the spot, feeling warmth where there should be only cold seawater. Okay, this is either really cool or really dangerous, he said. Probably both. Percy had learned enough to be cautious, but curiosity won out. He carefully brushed away sand, revealing the edge of something solid. More digging exposed a bronze chest no larger than a shoebox, its surface covered in corroded green patina and etched with symbols, some ancient Greek, others completely foreign to him. Definitely both, he decided. The chest had no obvious lock, just a seam where the lid met the base. When Percy traced his finger along the seam, the chest trembled. Before he could pull back, the lid cracked open, releasing a cloud of bubbles and what looked like golden light. Percy expected the light to disperse in the water, but it solidified into glowing script that W wrapped around his forearm like a tattoo before fading into his skin. A sharp sting made him wince. What the? Inside the chest lay a single scroll, somehow perfectly preserved despite centuries underwater. The papyrus should have disintegrated instantly, yet it remained intact when Percy carefully lifted it from the chest. The moment his fingers touched the scroll, the symbols on his arm flared with golden light. Annabeth is going to kill me, he muttered. Or give me a 3-hour lecture on proper archaeological procedures. Probably both. The water around him suddenly cooled 10 degrees. Percy's combat instincts kicked in just as the shadows behind him shifted unnaturally. He spun around, riptide materializing in his hand as he faced a creature he'd never seen before. It resembled a shark but with too many rows of teeth and limbs that shouldn't exist on any fish. Its skin rippled with darkness rather than scales, and its 6 eyes tracked Percy with predatory intelligence. Definitely not in the marine biology textbooks, Percy said, backing away slowly. The creature surged forward with impossible speed. Percy dodged, using the water to propel himself sideways, but the monster anticipated his movement. Sharp teeth grazed his shoulder, tearing through his t-shirt and drawing blood. Percy slashed with riptide, the celestial bronze blade leaving a glowing trail through the water. The creature shrieked, a sound that shouldn't travel underwater but somehow pierced Percy's skull like a needle. The cut he'd inflicted leaked darkness rather than blood. You're not from around here, are you? Percy grunted, pressing his advantage with another strike. The monster responded by splitting into 3 identical forms, each circling him with coordinated precision. Percy's heart hammered. He'd fought plenty of sea monsters, but none that could duplicate themselves. This is new, he said, gripping the scroll tighter as he tried to track all 3 creatures. The scroll in his hand suddenly grew warm. The golden script on Percy's arm flared again, and the scroll unraveled itself in the water. Instead of becoming soggy pulp, the papyrus remained firm as the writing upon it glowed with the same golden light. Okay, magic scroll. Now would be a good time to do something helpful. Percy called out as the shark creatures closed in. The scroll's glow intensified. The symbols rearranged themselves before Percy's eyes, forming words in ancient Greek. By blood and need, the first bond is called. Before Percy could process what that meant, the water around him began to churn. A vortex formed, centered on the scroll, pulling in seawater with increasing force. The shark creatures backed away, their movements suddenly hesitant. Light erupted from the center of the vortex, not golden this time, but electric blue. Percy shielded his eyes as the brightness intensified. When he looked again, a figure hovered in the water before him. A woman with long dark hair that floated around. Deer-like living shadows regarded him with intense gray eyes. She wore what looked like lightweight armor over a sleek black bodysuit, with strange symbols Percy didn't recognize etched across the shoulder plates. Most surprising of all, she wasn't wearing any breathing apparatus, yet seemed perfectly comfortable 50 feet underwater. She studied Percy for a moment, then turned to face the three shark creatures with cold assessment. Without a word, she extended her hand, and lightning, actual lightning, underwater, arced from her fingertips to the nearest creature. The monster convulsed violently before dissolving into dark particles. Impossible, Percy breathed, but he'd long ago learned that impossible had flexible meaning in his world. The woman glanced at him. Two more, she said, her voice somehow clear despite the water. You take left, I'll take right. Percy didn't question the instruction. He surged toward the left creature, Riptide leading. As he engaged, he caught glimpses of the woman moving with inhuman speed, her hands forming complex gestures before more lightning erupted around her. Percy's opponent was faster than before, its teeth snapping inches from his face as he twisted away. He used the water to boost his speed, circling behind the creature before driving Riptide through what he hoped was a vital spot. The monster thrashed, then dissolved like the first. When Percy turned, the woman stood calmly, no sign of the third creature. She floated toward him, studying the scroll still clutched in his hand. You called me, she said, not a question but a statement. I didn't mean to, Percy replied honestly. I just found this scroll, and then these things attacked, and the blood offering activated the summoning. I am bound to answer. She extended her hand. I am Takara of the Storm Realm. You now hold my contract. Percy stared at her outstretched hand, then at the scroll, then back at her. I'm Percy Jackson, and I have no idea what's happening right now. A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, crossed Takara's face. You're a powerful channel, but untrained. The scroll chose well. Before Percy could respond, the water churned again. Two more vortices formed on either side, smaller than the first but growing rapidly. More friends of yours? Percy asked. Takara shook her head, expression turning serious. The blood offering was substantial. You've called more than one. The vortices collapsed inward, revealing two more figures. To Percy's right materialized a woman with fiery red hair and golden armor that seemed to be made of overlapping scales. To his left appeared another woman with short silver hair and what looked like tribal markings across her exposed arms and shoulders. Two more contracts activated simultaneously, Takara observed, surprise evident in her voice. You must have strong bloodlines. The redhead approached first, golden eyes assessing Percy with undisguised curiosity. A sea child, she said, her voice carrying a musical lilt. Interesting. I am Kenna of the Flame Court. The silver-haired woman remained where she appeared, maintaining distance as she studied their surroundings. Lina, she said simply. Forest Realm. Her gaze settled on Percy's bleeding shoulder. Your blood called. There are enemies. There were, Percy said, gesturing to where the creatures had dissolved. Some kind of shadow shark things. Not your average monster. Lina's eyes narrowed. Void hunters. They shouldn't be in this realm. They followed the activation, Takara said. The scroll creates disturbances between dimensions when used. Percy felt a headache building. Look, I appreciate the help, but I have no idea what's going on. What is this scroll? Who are you people, and how are you breathing underwater? The three women exchanged glances. Kenna smiled, revealing slightly pointed teeth. He doesn't know what he's done. Clearly, Lina said dryly. Takara moved closer to Percy. The scroll is a dimensional contract. It allows a summoner, you, to call warriors from other realms to fight alongside you. Once called, we are bound to your service until the contract ends or one of us falls. Service. Percy frowned. I don't want servants. Not servants, Kenna corrected. Allies. The bond works both ways. You gain our powers, we gain access to your realm and share in your strength. Percy no T. CED. The golden script on his arm had changed, now displaying 3 distinct symbols. And the underwater breathing. The bond allows us to adapt to your environment, Lina explained. Just as you would adapt to ours if you crossed over. Percy was about to ask what that meant when he felt a familiar tingle at the base of his skull, the warning sense that had kept him alive through countless battles. Something's coming. Something big. The water darkened around them, temperature plummeting further. What emerged from the darkness made the previous creatures look like minnows. A massive shape, easily 30 feet long, with the same shadow skin but a form that resembled a twisted, prehistoric crocodile more than a shark. Void Sovereign, Takara said tensely. They're hunting the scroll. Percy raised Riptide. Well, they can't have it. Kenna moved to his right. Flames, actual flames underwater, dancing across her fingertips. First blood bond and already facing a sovereign. You live dangerously, sea child. Lina positioned herself on Percy's left, pulling twin curved blades from sheaths on her back. The contract is new. Our powers will be limited until the bond strengthens. The Void Sovereign roared, a sound that shook the water and sent nearby fish scattering in panic. Percy felt the current shift as the creature gathered itself to charge. Any suggestions? He asked. Takara's eyes narrowed. You control water. Direct currents around my lightning to amplify its reach. Kenna's fire will boil sections of water to create pressure differentials. Lina can strike vulnerable points if we create openings. Percy nodded, impressed by the tactical assessment. Let's do it. The monster charged with devastating speed. Percy thrust out his hand, manipulating the water to create a whirling barrier between them and the creature. The Sovereign crashed into it, momentarily slowed but hardly stopped. Now, Percy called. Takara unleashed lightning that Percy guided through salt-dense currents he rapidly formed. The electricity arced and branched, striking the creature multiple times. It writhed but continued forward. Kenna's fire created superheated pockets in the water, generating explosive steam bubbles that battered the monster from different angles. Percy felt the temperature fluctuations and instinctively harmonized with them, creating pressure waves that hammered the Sovereign. Lina darted in during the creature's moment of disorientation, her blades leaving glowing green trails as she struck precise points along its shadowy hide. The monster thrashed, nearly catching her with its massive tail, but she twisted away with inhuman grace. Percy felt something new, a connection to each woman's movements, as though their powers were extensions of his own. He could say the electrical potential Takara manipulated, the heat Kenna generated, the strange plant-based energy that fueled Lina's speed. Again, he called, understanding instinctively how to combine their attacks. Percy created a swirling vortex around the creature, trapping it in place. Takara charged the water with lightning while Kenna superheated strategic points. The combination created a devastating electrical storm contained within Percy's waterspout. Lina moved like a bullet through the electrified water, somehow unaffected as she delivered precise strikes to the now exposed weak points on the creature's underbelly. The Void Sovereign convulsed violently, its body beginning to break apart into the same dark particles as the smaller creatures. But before it fully dissolved, it fixed its gaze on Percy and spoke directly into his mind. The scroll will doom your world as it has doomed others. The barriers weaken with each summoning. Then it was gone, leaving only dissipating darkness in the clear Mediterranean water. Percy stared at the empty space where the monster had been. Did anyone else hear that? The 3 women nodded, their expressions grave. The void creatures always say such things, Kenna said. Though her confident tone seemed forced. They fear the power of the contracts. Because the contracts allow us to stop them, Takara added, but she exchanged a concerned glance with Lina. Percy felt the scroll pulse in his hand. We need to get to Camp Half-Blood. I have friends who might understand what this is. Camp Half-Blood, Lina questioned. It's a safe place for demigods, children of gods and mortals, Percy explained. I'm a son of Poseidon, god of the sea. Understanding dawned on their faces. A divine bloodline, Takara murmured. That explains the strong connection. Percy pointed toward the surface. It's about 60 miles to the Greek coast, then we'll need to catch a flight to New York. Kenna laughed. Or we could use a dimensional shortcut. She looked at the others. The bond is new but should be strong enough for a short jump with the scroll as a focus. Percy frowned. Dimensional shortcut. Much like how we were summoned, Lina explained. The scroll allows limited travel between connected points. With your blood and our power, we can create a temporary pathway. Think of it as a portal, Takara said. You visualize your destination. We provide the energy to create the path. Percy considered this. After everything he'd just witnessed, a magical portal seemed almost mundane. And this is safer than facing airport security. Tie with 3 mysteriously appearing women with weapons. Kenna grinned. Much safer. For the airport staff, at least. All right, Percy decided. Let me secure this first. He carefully rolled the SC roll and placed it in a waterproof tube from his diving kit. So how does this work? Takara, Kenna, and Lina positioned themselves in a triangle around Percy. Visualize your destination clearly, Takara instructed. Focus on details. Sights, sounds, smells. Percy closed his eyes, picturing the shores of Long Island Sound where Camp Half-Blood stood. He imagined the pine tree on Half-Blood Hill, the big house with its blue roof. The strawberry fields, the smell of the sea breeze mixing with wood smoke from the forges. Now let your blood reconnect with the scroll, Lina said. Percy opened the tube and touched the scroll again. The symbols on his arm flared golden once more. Perfect, Kenna said. Now don't let go of that thought. The 3 women began channeling their energies, Takara's lightning, Kenna's fire, and Lina's earth and power, creating currents that spiraled around Percy. The water between them began to shimmer and distort, opening into what looked like a tunnel of swirling light and shadow. Step through, Takara commanded, quickly, before it destabilizes. Percy hesitated only briefly before pushing forward into the tunnel. The sensation was like being simultaneously compressed and stretched, his body becoming weightless for several heart-stopping seconds. Then gravity returned with crushing force as he fell forward onto solid ground. Grass. He could feel grass beneath his palms. And he was completely dry, even his clothes. Percy looked up to see the familiar pine tree of Half-Blood Hill silhouetted against the afternoon sky. Somehow, they'd traveled from the Mediterranean to Long Island in seconds. Takara, Kenna, and Lina materialized beside him, looking slightly strained but otherwise unaffected by the journey. That was. Percy struggled to find words. Efficient, Lina supplied. I was going to say, insane, but efficient works too. A shout from down the hill drew their attention. A group of campers had spotted them and were approaching cautiously, weapons drawn. Percy recognized Clarice leading the group, her electric spear maimor crackling ominously. Jackson, she called. Where did you come from? And who are they? Percy stood, raising his hands in a placating gesture. Hey, Clarice. It's a long story involving an underwater chest, a magic scroll, and shadow monsters from another dimension. Clarice's scowl deepened. So Tuesday for you, then. Pretty much. She shifted her attention to the 3 women, assessing them with the practiced eye of a daughter of Ares. They don't feel like monsters or gods. Because we're neither, Kenna said. Matching Clarice's challenging tone, Percy stepped between them. They're allies. From other realms, dimensions. I'm still figuring it out. Is Chiron at the big house? We need to talk to him. Clarice hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But they surrender their weapons first. Takara raised an eyebrow. We are bound to Percy's protection. We don't surrender our weapons. The tension crackled almost visibly until Percy intervened again. They're with me, Clarice. I vouch for them. After a tense moment, Clarice lowered her spear slightly. Your funeral if they're not what you think. She turned to lead them down the hill. As they walked toward the big house, Percy noticed campers stopping their activities to stare. The 3 women drew attention not just for being strangers but for the aura of power that seemed to surround them. Annabeth emerged from the big house just as they approached, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, her gray eyes widening at the sight of Percy with his unusual companions. Percy, you're supposed to be in Greece for another week. Her gaze shifted to the 3 women, analyzing them with typical Athenian thoroughness. What happened? Percy gave her a weary smile. Remember how you always say I can't have a normal vacation? What did you do? Found an ancient magical scroll that summons warriors from other dimensions and may have ACC. Identically created some kind of interdimensional bond that lets us travel through portals. Annabeth stared at him for a long moment. You know, most people just bring back souvenir t-shirts from their vacations. Chiron appeared in the doorway behind her, his brown eyes showing concern as he took in the scene. In his wheelchair form, he looked like a middle-aged teacher in a tweed jacket, but Y knew the centaur had seen more strange events in his thousands of years than anyone alive. Percy, he greeted, I sense you've brought us something unusual. That's putting it mildly, Percy admitted. Chiron, this is Takara, Kenna, and Lina. They're from different dimensions or realms, summoned by this. He held up the waterproof tube containing the scroll. Chiron's expression grew serious. Perhaps you should all come inside. This sounds like a matter requiring privacy. The group followed Chiron into the big house, through the main room with its ping-pong table where council meetings were held, and into Chiron's private study. The room was lined with books and artifacts from thousands of years of history. Now, Chiron said once they were all seated, please explain from the beginning. Percy recounted finding the chest, the scroll, the attack by the Void Hunters, and the subsequent summoning of Takara, Kenna, and Lina. He described their battle with the Void Sovereign and its ominous warning. Throughout the explanation, Chiron's expression grew increasingly troubled. When Percy finished, the centaur wheeled himself to a bookshelf and pulled down an ancient-looking volume. May I see the scroll? He asked. Percy handed over the tube. Chiron carefully extracted the scroll and examined it without unrolling it fully. His fingers traced the symbols along the edges. This is very old, he said finally, and not entirely of Greek origin. The base language is ancient Greek, yes, but these other symbols. He pointed to markings along the border. These are not from any pantheon I recognize. Can you tell what it is? Annabeth asked. I have suspicions, Chiron replied cautiously. He looked at the three women. You called this a dimensional contract. What precisely does that mean? Takara answered. It's a binding agreement between realms. A powerful summoner can call warriors from other dimensions to fight alongside them. The blood bond creates a connection that allows sharing of power and temporary passage between worlds. And what do you gain from this arrangement? Chiron asked. Access to new realms, Kenna said. Knowledge, experience, power. The bond strengthens both sides. And when the contract ends? Chiron pressed. The three women exchanged glances. Lina spoke this time. The contract can end several ways. Completion of a designated task, death of the summoner, mutual agreement to terminate, or, she hesitated, or, Annabeth prompted, or the fulfillment of the scroll's maximum capacity, Lina finished. Percy frowned. Maximum capacity. The scroll you found is designed to bind 20 warriors, Takara explained. 3 have been called. 17 remain potential. Silence fell over the room as everyone processed this. 20 dimensions connected to ours through Percy. Annabeth said slowly. And those shadow creatures, Void Hunters, you called them, they attacked because of this connection. The void exists between dimensions, Kenna explained. When barriers between realms thin, void creatures can slip through. They seek to devour the energy of living worlds. The Sovereign said the scroll would doom our world, Percy remembered. That the barriers weaken with each summoning. Chiron carefully rolled the scroll and returned it to the tube. This is concerning. In all my years, I've encountered mentions of dimensional travel, but never concrete evidence. The gods themselves maintain certain barriers between realms, the mortal world, the divine world, the various afterlife domains. Could this scroll bypass those barriers? Annabeth asked. It already has, Chiron said gravely. These 3 warriors are not from any realm of Greek mythology. They represent powers and principles from entirely different cosmologies. Percy looked at his arm where the golden symbols had faded to what looked like faint tattoos. So what do we do? Is this dangerous? Potentially, Chiron admitted, but it may also be necessary. Necessary? Annabeth questioned. Chiron wheeled back to his desk and opened a drawer, removing what looked like a news clipping. Reports have been coming in from satyrs around the country. Strange disturbances, monsters behaving erratically, and sightings of creatures that match your description of these void hunters. Small ones, but increasing in number. The barriers were already weakening, Takara said, her expression grim. The scroll didn't cause this, it responded to it. That would explain why it activated now, after presumably centuries underwater, Chiron mused. Percy stood and paced the room. So these void things are already invading, and the scroll is what? Our defense against them. Perhaps, Chiron said. In my experience, powerful artifacts rarely appear by chance. If the scroll found you, Percy, it may be because you're needed. Great, Percy muttered. Another world-saving quest. Just what my vacation needed. Annabeth touched his arm. We should consult the oracle. If this is as serious as it sounds, there might be a prophecy. Rachel's in Manhattan this week, Chiron said. Art exhibition. I'll send an Iris message. A commotion outside interrupted them. The door burst open as Grover Underwood stumbled in, looking frantic. His curly hair was wild, and he was breathing hard as if he'd been running. Percy, you're back, he bleated. Thank the gods. We've got trouble at the beach. What kind of trouble? Percy asked, already moving toward the door. Big shadow fish things, Grover said. Like sharks but, wrong. They're coming out of the water, a lot of them. Percy's eyes met Takara's. Void hunters. They followed our dimensional trail, Kenna said, rising. The jump created a temporary pathway. How many? Lina asked Grover. At least a dozen, Grover said, eyeing the strange women with confusion. Who are? Later, Percy cut him off. We need to get to the beach now. The group rushed from the big house, Percy leading with Takara, Kenna, and Lina close behind. Annabeth fell into step beside him, drawing her Dracon bone sword. Clarice, who had been waiting outside, joined them with several other armed campers. What's happening, Jackson? She demanded. Remember those shadow monsters I mentioned? Percy called back. They found us. They crested the hill that overlooked Camp Half-Blood's beach. The sight below froze Percy's blood. Not a dozen void hunters as Grover had reported, but at least 20 emerged from the surf. Behind them, the water darkened ominously. The Sovereign, Takara warned. It's regenerating. Percy uncapped Riptide, the sword expanding to full length in his hand. Clarice, keep the younger campers back. These things are dangerous. For once, the daughter of Ares didn't argue. Defense positions, she shouted to the gathered campers. Archers on the ridge, heavy fighters front line. Percy turned to his three new allies. Same strategy as before, Kenna grinned, flames already dancing across her fingers. Unless you have a better idea. Actually, I do. Percy pointed to the creek that ran down to the beach. Takara, if I redirect that water around the hunters, can you electrify all of them at once? Takara assessed the distance. Yes, but it will drain me significantly. Lina, can your blades cut multiple targets quickly? The silver-haired warrior nodded. In sequence, yes. Kenna, we need area denial. Can you create a fire barrier between the water and camp? Child's play, she affirmed. Percy looked at Annabeth. We need to isolate the big one when it emerges. Ideas. Annabeth studied the darkening water. Greek fire in the right spots could create underwater explosions to drive it where we want. Perfect. Percy turned back to the approaching threat. Let's go. The group charged down toward the beach. Percy channeling his power as they ran. The creek responded to his will, water diverting from its path to follow him in a hovering stream. Camp Half-Blood's archers launched their first volley. Celestial bronze-tipped arrows raining down on the advancing void hunters. The arrows seemed to pass through some of the creatures without effect, while others stuck but didn't slow the monsters. Their vulnerability shifts, Lina called out. Hit the same spot twice. Percy reached the edge of the beach and thrust his hands forward. The creek water surged past him, encircling the group of void hunters in a ring. The creatures hissed and tried to break through, but Percy maintained the barrier, compressing it inward. Now, Takara, the lightning wielder raised both hands, electricity arcing between her fingers before discharging into Percy's water ring. The effect was immediate and devastating. The water conducted the charge perfectly, electricity engulfing all the trapped void hunters simultaneously. Their shadowy forms convulsed, becoming temporarily solid as the energy disrupted whatever allowed them to shift between states. Lina, the forest warrior, launched herself forward with incredible speed, her twin blades flashing as she darted from creature to creature. Each strike was precisely aimed at the now vulnerable points exposed by the electrical attack. She moved so quickly she appeared to be in multiple places at once, green energy trailing from her blades. Meanwhile, Kenna had taken position at the water's edge. With a series of complex gestures, she sent walls of flame erupting along the shoreline, creating a barrier between the water and the land. The fire burned with unnatural intensity, somehow igniting even on the wet sand. Herc, Y sensed movement beneath the waves, something massive approaching. Annabeth, now. Annabeth and several Hephaestus campers hurled specially prepared vials into the water at strategic points. The Greek fire ignited on contact, creating underwater explosions that sent plumes of steam hissing into the air. The dark shape beneath the surface veered away from the explosions, exactly as planned, moving toward the only clear approach, a narrow channel they'd left undefended. "It's coming," Percy shouted. "Everyone ready." The water bulged and then erupted as the fully regenerated Void Sovereign burst through the surface. It was larger than before, its shadow flesh rippling with what looked like faces trapped beneath the surface. Its 6 eyes locked onto Percy with unmistakable hatred. "The scroll bearer." Its voice echoed in Percy's mind. "Give us the artifact, and your world may be spared." "Not happening," Percy replied aloud, gripping Riptide tighter. The Sovereign lunged forward, clearing Kenna's fire barrier with terrifying ease. Its massive jaws snapped where Percy had been standing a moment before, but he'd already rolled aside, slashing at the creature's flank as he moved. Riptide left a glowing wound that leaked darkness. The monster roared, the sound vibrating through Percy's bones. It whipped its tail around, catching several campers and sending them flying. Clarice charged in, her electric spear plunging deep into the creature's side. The Sovereign barely seemed to notice, shaking her off like an irritating insect. "It's stronger here," Takara called, launching enough lightning strike that the creature seemed to absorb. "It's feeding off the dimensional disturbance." Percy felt a tug in his gut as he summoned more water, this time from the Long Island Sound itself. A massive wave rose behind him, hovering for a moment before crashing down onto the Sovereign with devastating force. The creature was momentarily pinned, struggling against the pressure. "Percy!" Annabeth shouted. "The scroll!" It reacted to the creature before. Percy pulled the waterproof tube from his pocket. The scroll inside was glowing through the plastic, pulsing in time with the symbols on his arm. Acting on instinct, he opened the tube and unfurled the scroll. The golden script rearranged itself again, forming new words. "Blood of the sea, call forth the storm." Percy didn't understand what it meant, but Takara did. She rushed to his side, placing her hand over the scroll. "It's asking for a combined attack," she explained quickly. "Your power and mine, channeled through the bond." "How?" "Focus on the water around the creature. I'll do the rest." Percy concentrated, maintaining the pressure of the water pinning the Sovereign in place. Takara placed her other hand on Percy's shoulder, and immediately he felt her power flowing into him. Raw electrical energy that should have fried him instantly but instead merged with his own abilities. The water around the Void Sovereign began to glow with blue-white light as electricity infused every drop. The creature thrashed more violently, its roars becoming desperate. "More," Takara urged. "Channel everything." Percy closed his eyes, reaching deeper into his connection with water than he ever had before. He felt every molecule surrounding the monster, every current and eddy. When he opened his eyes again, they glowed with same blue-white light as the electrified water. With a shout, Percy clenched his fist. The water compressed around the Sovereign, pressure increasing exponentially as Takara's lightning intensified. For a moment, the creature's form seemed to solidify completely, no longer shadow but physical matter trapped in Percy's grip. "Lina, Kenna, now," Takara called. The two warriors struck simultaneously. "Why?" Lina's blades finding the creature's heart while Kenna sent a concentrated blast of flame down its gaping throat. The combined attack, channeled through Percy and Takara's elemental storm, proved too much for the Sovereign. The creature's body began to break apart, not into shadows this time but into particles of light that scattered like dust in the wind. As it dissolved, its final thoughts reached Percy: "You've won nothing." The scroll opens doors that cannot be closed. They are coming. Then it was gone, leaving only scorched sand and receding waves. The remaining Void Hunters had been destroyed during the battle. Their essence dissipated. Percy stumbled, suddenly exhausted. Annabeth caught him before he could fall. "Percy, I'm okay," he managed, though his limbs felt like lead. "Just drained." Takara, Kenna, and Lina looked similarly affected, their earlier power now dimmed. The scroll in Percy's hand had stopped glowing, returning to its seemingly ordinary appearance. Chiron galloped down to the beach. His centaur form now revealed as urgency overrode discretion. "Is everyone all right?" "No casualties," Clarice reported, helping a younger camper to his feet. "Some injuries, nothing serious." "The Sovereign?" Chiron asked. "Destroyed," Percy said. "For now, at least." "It said, they are coming," Annabeth noted. "They who?" Takara, Kenna, and Lina exchanged grim looks. "If Void Sovereigns can fully materialize in your world," Takara said, "then the barriers between dimensions are weaker than we thought." "The Void Lords," Kenna added. "Entities that command the Sovereigns. If they can cross over." Lina finished the thought. "No single realm would survive." Percy rolled up the scroll and returned it to its tube. "Then we'd better figure out how to use this thing properly. Fast." Chiron nodded solemnly. "Come back to the big house. We must contact Olympus immediately. The gods need to know what we're facing." As they walked back up from the beach, campers giving them a wide berth, Percy felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. Just when he thought he'd earned some peace, a new threat emerged, one that apparently endangered not just his world but many others. He glanced at Takara, Kenna, and Lina walking beside him. 3 warriors from 3 different dimensions, bound to him through a mysterious scroll. According to them, 17 more connections remained possible. "So," he said quietly to Annabeth, "about that normal vacation." She squeezed his hand. "Next time, maybe stick to tourist traps." "Deal." The golden symbols on Percy's arm pulsed once, as if in response to his thoughts. Whatever was coming, whatever doors the scroll had opened, he had a feeling his life had just become even more complicated than usual. And for Percy Jackson, that was saying something. Back at the big house, Chiron established an iris message connection to Olympus. The rainbow-tinted image showed the throne room, where Zeus and Poseidon appeared to be in the middle of an argument. They fell silent at the sight of Chiron's message. "Centaur," Zeus acknowledged gruffly. "This is unexpected." "Lord Zeus, Lord Poseidon," Chiron bowed. "I apologize for the interruption, but we face a situation of grave importance." Poseidon leaned forward, his sea-green eyes, so similar to Percy's, focusing on his son in the background. "Percy, you've returned from Greece early. He's brought something back with him," Chiron explained, gesturing for Percy to step forward. Percy held up the tube containing the scroll. "I found this underwater near Crete. It's some kind of dimensional artifact." "Dimensional?" Zeus's eyes narrowed dangerously, storm clouds gathering in the throne room. "Explain." Percy recounted his discovery and the subsequent events, including the appearance of Takara, Kenna, and Lina, who stood respectfully behind him. Both gods listened with increasing concern. When Percy mentioned the Void Hunters and the Sovereign, Poseidon and Zeus exchanged alarmed glances. "We've sensed disturbances," Poseidon admitted. "Areas where the boundaries of our realm seemed thinner. But nothing has breached Olympus's defenses." "Yet," Zeus added ominously, "the scroll appears to be a tool for dimensional summoning," Chiron explained. "It has created bonds between Percy and warriors from other realms." Zeus's expression darkened. "Such tools are forbidden. The separation of realms is maintained for good reason." "With respect, Lord Zeus," Takara stepped forward, the barriers were already weakening. "The Void Sea." Reachers were crossing over before the scroll activated. "And who might you be?" Zeus demanded. "I am Takara of the Storm Realm, first bond of the contract." Zeus studied her with suspicious eyes. "You wield lightning. A different form than yours, but yes." The King of Gods seemed displeased by this but turned his attention back to Percy. "This scroll must be surrendered to Olympus immediately." Percy hesitated. "The thing is, I'm not sure that's possible now." He held up his arm, showing the faded symbols. "According to them, the scroll has created a blood bond. It's linked to me." And what happens if we sever that link? Zeus asked dangerously. Kenna stepped forward. The backlash would destroy him and potentially tear open the dimensional barriers completely. The contract, once initiated, must run its course. Zeus looked ready to argue, but Poseidon raised a hand. Brother, perhaps we should consult Hecate on this matter. If dimensional barriers are involved, her expertise would be valuable. After a moment's consideration, Zeus nodded curtly. Very well. In the meantime, he fixed Percy with a stern gaze. Do not activate any more of these bonds without Olympian approval. Is that clear, Crystal? Percy agreed. And keep that scroll secure, Poseidon added. If it's as powerful as it seems, others will sense it. The iris message shimmered and faded, leaving the group in silence. That went better than expected, Percy muttered. Zeus didn't blast you on the spot, so yes, relatively well, Chiron agreed dryly. Annabeth, who had been studying a map of reported disturbances during the call, looked up. There's a pattern to these sightings. They're concentrating around places with significant magical history. Mount Tam in California, the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, the Bermuda Triangle. Power attracts power, Lina observed. The void is drawn to sources of energy it can consume. Percy rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. So what's our next move? Before anyone could answer, the door flew open. Rachel Elizabeth Dare stood in the doorway, her red hair wild around her face, her eyes glowing green. Green mist swirled around her feet as the spirit of Delphi took control. Rachel. Annabeth started forward, but Chiron held her back. The oracle comes, he said quietly. Rachel walked into the room with the unnatural grace of the possessed. When she spoke, her voice was multiplied, ancient and powerful. The scroll of worlds in Seasun's hand, * 20 bonds to forge, 20 realms to stand. Shadow feeds on light between the doors. What once was separate now joins in wars. The void consumes what barriers remain, * unless dimensions united break the chain. Rachel collapsed forward. Percy caught her before she hit the floor, easing her onto a nearby couch. I came as soon as I felt it, she mumbled, her eyes returning to normal. The prophecy, it was urgent. You didn't even make it back to camp before the oracle took over, Annabeth said, handing Rachel a glass of water. Rachel sipped the water, her hands shaking slightly. What did I say? Chiron repeated the prophecy, his expression grave. It seems to confirm our fears. The scroll is indeed central to what's happening. 20 bonds to forge, Percy quoted. That matches what you said about the scroll's capacity. He looked at Takara, Kenna, and Lina. Quote, and the reference to the void-consuming barriers, Takara noted. The prophecy suggests that united dimensions are the solution, not the problem. Which contradicts what the Void Sovereign told Percy, Annabeth pointed out. Percy paced the room. So either the monsters are lying to prevent us from using the scroll, or the oracle is leading us into disaster, Chiron finished grimly. Prophecies are notoriously double-edged. 20 realms to stand, Lina repeated thoughtfully. Not 20 warriors, but 20 realms. The distinction is important. Kenna nodded. Each of us represents our realm in the bond. Through us, our entire dimensions become connected to yours. Which could strengthen the barriers rather than weaken them, Takara suggested. A network of realms standing together against the void. Percy looked down at the scroll in his hands. So instead of stopping, the prophecy is telling us to activate all 20 bonds. It would appear so, Chiron said cautiously. Though Zeus may have different ideas. Rachel sat up straighter. The prophecy came now for a reason. The oracle doesn't waste timing. Percy made a decision. We need to understand this scroll better. How it works, what exactly it does. How to control the connections it creates. And quickly, Annabeth added. If these void incursions are increasing, we don't have much time. There's another problem, Lina said. The dimensional jumps we make leave traces that void creatures can follow. The more we travel between points in this realm, the more openings we create for them to exploit. So we're stuck at camp? Percy asked. Not necessarily, Takara said. But we should limit jumps to necessity and ensure we close the pathways properly when we use them. Chiron wheeled back to his desk. Quote, I'll send messages to all our allies, the Romans at Camp Jupiter, the hunters of Artemis, the Amazons. If this threat is as significant as it seems, we'll need everyone prepared. Percy nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. Just when he thought he'd earned some peace after the giant war, a new crisis emerged, one that threatened not just his world but apparently many others. So much for that normal vacation, he muttered. Annabeth squeezed his hand. When have our lives ever been normal? Percy managed a small smile. Fair point. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Percy sat alone on the dock extending into the canoe lake. The moon reflected off the still water, creating a silver path across the surface. The scroll lay in his lap, its seaman gly ordinary appearance belying its power. He heard footsteps on the wooden planks and turned to see Takara approaching. Unlike earlier, she now wore more casual clothes, jeans and a camp half-blood shirt borrowed from the camp store, though the effect was somewhat undermined by the lightning-etched bracers she still wore on her forearms. "May I join you?" she asked. Percy nodded, and she sat beside him, her legs dangling over the edge of the dock next to his. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Sleep patterns differ in my realm," she explained. "And the bond is unsettling, at first. I can sense your emotions, faintly." Percy raised an eyebrow. "That sounds invasive." "It works both ways. Focus, and you'll feel echoes of mine as well." Percy closed his eyes and concentrated. Sure enough, he sensed something, a current of calm determination undercut with concern and curiosity. "That's strange. It will strengthen over time," Takara said. "Eventually, we'll be able to communicate through the bond across great distances. Like telepathy, not thoughts, just impressions and locations. Useful in battle." Percy looked down at the scroll. "What happens when all 20 bonds are formed? Does the scroll just deactivate?" Takara was silent for a moment. "No one knows for certain. The scrolls are ancient, even in my realm. Stories say they were created during the First Void War, when the dimensions were first separated to protect them from complete consumption." First Void War. So there have been others. Skirmishes, mainly. The void is eternal, always hungry, always seeking ways in. The barriers have held for millennia, but they require maintenance, power. And that power is fading, Percy guessed. Takara nodded. "In my realm, we've seen the signs for generations. Stars disappearing, regions of emptiness growing at the edges of our world. When your blood called through the scroll, I knew immediately what it meant. That the void was breaking through here too." "Yes." Takara looked out across the lake. "Your world is beautiful. Different from mine in many ways, but familiar in others. The sun feels the same." Percy studied her profile in the moonlight. "What's your world like?" "Perpetual storm season," she said with a small smile. "The lightning never stops completely, just waxes and wanes. We build our cities in the calm eyes of massive storm systems that last for centuries." "Sounds intense," says the boy who lives on a planet that's 70% water, she countered with surprising humor. Percy laughed. "Fair point." He sobered quickly. "The prophecy mentioned war. I've been through 2 major wars already. I was hoping for some peace." "Warriors rarely choose when they're needed," Takara said gently. "But they can choose how they face what comes." "Very fortune cookie," Percy remarked. Takara raised an eyebrow. "Fortune cookie. Never mind." Percy slipped the scroll back into its protective tube. "I should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be busy." They walked back toward the cabins together. Percy had been given permission to house his 3 guests in the currently empty Poseidon cabin, as they were bound to him. As they approached, Percy noticed Kenna sitting on the cabin roof, flames dancing between her fingers as she gazed at the stars. "Is she going to set my cabin on fire?" Percy asked. "Kenna has perfect control," Takara assured him. "Fire is as natural to her as water is to you." Inside, they found Lina arranging what looked like small plants in pots along the windowsill. She acknowledged their entrance with a nod but continued her work. "What are those?" Percy asked. "Warning systems," Lina explained. "They'll react to void energy if any approaches while we sleep." "Smart," Percy approved, dropping onto his bunk. Despite his exhaustion, sleep seemed distant. His mind raced with everything that had happened. The scroll, the new allies, the prophecy, the threat of dimensional collapse. As if sensing his turmoil, Takara said, "Rest." The bond is new and has drained you more than you realize. Tomorrow we can begin proper training. Training. You've only scratched the surface of what the bond allows, Kenna said. Entering through the window. Combined abilities, shared strengths, dimensional awareness. The scroll chose you for a reason, Lina added, finishing with her plants. Your potential as a channel exceeds most summoners. Percy wasn't sure if that was comforting or concerning. Great. More responsibility. More power, Kenna corrected with a grin. Which is always fun. Despite his anxiety, Percy found himself smiling at her enthusiasm. These three women were unlike anyone he'd met. Not demigods, not monsters, not mortals, but something else entirely. Yet there was something familiar in their warrior spirit. Something he recognized from his friends at both Camp Half-Blood and Camp Jupiter. Perhaps, he thought as he drifted toward sleep, this bizarre new development wasn't entirely a disaster. After all, powerful allies were never a bad thing when facing world-threatening danger. His last conscious thought was wondering what Zeus would say when he inevitably had to activate more bonds. Despite the god's explicit instructions not to. Probably something along the lines of, "Jackson, you've done it again." Some things, at least, remained predictable. Percy dreamed of darkness. Not the ordinary darkness of night, but a living void that consumed everything it touched. Stars winked out as it passed, leaving nothing behind, not even the absence of light, but the absence of existence itself. Within this consuming darkness, shapes moved. Massive entities that defied comprehension, their forms constantly shifting as though reality itself couldn't decide what they were supposed to look like. They communicated in a language of silence that somehow pierced Percy's mind like shards of ice. The scroll bearer awakens to our presence, *1 vast consciousness noted. How curious. The bonds begin again, another responded. After so long, 20 realms united would threaten us, *3 observed. We must accelerate our plans. The sea child's blood is potent, *1 acknowledged. A strong channel. Then we shall send a worthy test, *2 decided. The sovereign was merely a scout. Percy tried to speak, to demand answers, but found himself voic. Aeless in this non-space between dimensions. He listens, *3 noticed, its attention focusing on Percy with terrible intensity. He watches. Then let him see, *1 said. The darkness parted like a curtain, revealing a scene that made Percy's blood run cold. Camp Half-Blood lay in ruins, the strawberry fields withered, the cabins reduced to splintered wood. The forest burned with unnatural black flame, and the lake had been drained to a cracked mud pit. Most horrifying of all were the campers, his friends, frozen like statues, their bodies half consumed by the same living darkness that surrounded him. This is one possible future, the second entity informed him dispassionately. One of many. The scroll offers false hope, *3 added. The more bonds you form, the wider the doors open for us. Choose wisely, sea child, *1 concluded. Surrender the scroll to the void willingly, and your realm alone will be consumed. Continue this path of resistance. The Vis. Ion shifted to show not just Camp Half-Blood but all of Earth. Cities darkened, oceans emptied, mountains crumbled. All realms will pay the price. Percy woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in his bunk. Sweat drenched his shirt, and his heart hammered against his ribs. The cabin was quiet except for his ragged breathing, moonlight still streaming through the windows. Or no, not moonlight. The place Aunt's Lina had placed on the windowsill glowed with soft silver luminescence, pulsing gently like heartbeats. They sense your distress, Lina's voice came from the shadows near the door. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, but clearly awake. Your dream reached through the bond. You saw it? Percy asked, horrified at the thought. Not the images, the emotion. Lina opened her eyes, which reflected the plant's silver light. Fear, doubt, determination. Percy swung his legs over the side of the bunk. They were trying to scare me into giving up the scroll. The Void Lords, Takara said, emerging from her own bunk. They rarely communicate directly with mortals. They showed me Camp Half-Blood destroyed, Earth consumed. Percy's hands shook slightly. They said forming more bonds would only open more doors for them. Kenna sat up, flames briefly flickering in her hair before subsiding. Of course they would say that. They fear the United Realms. Are they telling the truth? And the prophecy is leading us into disaster, Percy countered. Lina rose gracefully to her feet. There is an easy way to test this. When you formed bonds with us, did you sense the barriers weakening or strengthening? Percy considered this. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel. Close your eyes, Takara instructed, moving to sit beside him. Focus on the symbols on your arm. Percy obeyed, concentrating on the marks that had appeared when he first touched the scroll. At first, he felt nothing beyond the lingering anxiety from his nightmare. Then, gradually, he became aware of something else. 3 distinct connections flowing from the symbols, like rivers of energy extending outward from his body. I can feel you, he said slowly. All 3 of you, like tethers. Follow one of those connections. Takara guided, not all the way, just to the threshold. Percy focused on the connection that felt like electrical energy, Takara's. He traced it mentally, following its path until he encountered what felt like a barrier, not solid but permeable, like a membrane. There's something here, he reported. Like a film or a curtain. That's the dimensional barrier, Takara confirmed. What's its condition? Percy examined the sensation more carefully. It feels reinforced, like the connection is actually supporting it somehow. He opened his eyes to find all 3 women looking satisfied. The Void Lords lied, Kenna stated flatly. The bonds strengthen the barriers, they don't weaken them. But the monsters are still getting through, Percy pointed out. Because the barriers were already failing, Lina explained. The scroll is a response to that failure, not its cause. Percy stood and paced the cabin, processing this information. So the prophecy is right. We need all 20 bonds to reinforce the barriers completely. It would appear so, Takara agreed. But Zeus ordered me not to activate any more bonds. Kenna snorted. Gods, always believing they know best. Percy gave her a warning look. That's my uncle you're talking about. The one who can blast us with lightning. I'd like to see him try, Kenna replied with a confident smirk, flames dancing briefly around her fingers. The point, Lina interjected, is that we must proceed carefully. The gods of your realm have power here, and their cooperation would be valuable. Percy nodded, making a decision. First thing tomorrow, we go back to Olympus. We show them what I've seen, explain what we've learned. If the situation is as serious as it seems, even Zeus will have to listen to reason. And if he doesn't? Takara asked. Percy's expression hardened. Then we do what we've always done. Save the world anyway. Morning brought chaos to Camp Half-Blood. Percy was awakened by why the sound of the emergency conch horn blaring across the valley. He stumbled out of the Poseidon cabin, riptide already in hand, to find campers rushing toward Half-Blood Hill. What's happening? He called to Will Solace as the son of Apollo sprinted past. Multiple breaches, Will shouted back, shadow creatures coming through all around the perimeter. Percy cursed and broke into a run, Takara, Kenna, and Lina falling into step beside him. As they crested the hill, he saw what had caused the alarm. The protective barrier around camp, maintained by Talia's pine tree and the golden fleece, wavered visibly. Its usual transparent shimmer now fluctuating like heat waves over asphalt. Beyond it, at multiple points around the perimeter, dark tiers had appeared in the air itself, vertical rifts that leaked shadow like oil. From these rifts emerged void hunters, dozens of them, larger and more varied than those Percy had encountered before. Some resembled the shark-like creatures from yesterday, but others took different forms. Serpentine shadows that slithered through the air, hulking quadrupeds with too many limbs, winged things that defied description. The Void Lords are testing the defenses, Takara observed grimly. Yesterday was just the beginning. Clarice was already organizing the defense, shouting orders to position fighters at each breach point. Chiron galloped among the campers, bow in hand, directing archers to high ground. Percy, Annabeth called, running toward them. The barrier's failing at multiple points. It can't handle dimensional rifts. We need to close those tiers, Percy said. Any ideas? Lina stepped forward, studying the nearest rift. The scroll might be able to seal them temporarily. It was designed to control dimensional apertures. Worth a shot. Percy pulled the scroll from his pocket, where he'd kept it close all night. As they approached the nearest breach, Percy could feel the wrongness of it, a cold emptiness that sucked at his energy. The rift pulsed and widened as more void hunters pushed through, immediately engaging the defending campers. "How do we use the scroll to close it?" Percy asked, unfurling the ancient papyrus. "Blood," Takara said simply. "The scroll responds to your blood as the summoner." Percy didn't hesitate. He pressed his thumb to Riptide's edge, drawing a thin line of blood, then touched it to the scroll. Immediately, the golden script began to rearrange itself, forming new patterns. "Read it," Kenna urged. "Whatever it shows you." The Greek letters formed words that Percy instinctively understood. "By blood of the summoner. Dimensions obey. Close what has opened, seal what has frayed." Percy repeated the words aloud, directing his attention toward the rift. The scroll glowed brightly, and the golden symbols on Percy's arm flared in response. The rift seemed to resist, its edges pulsing and expanding, but then slowly, reluctantly, began to close. The void hunters already through screeched in alarm, redoubling their attacks on the campers. One massive creature, a grotesque hybrid of insect and reptile, charged directly at Percy. Kenna intercepted it, her body erupting in flames as she engaged. Her fire seemed to burn through the creature's shadowy substance, causing it to recoil in pain. "Keep focusing on the rift," she called. "We'll handle the stragglers." Percy maintained his concentration, feeling the power of the scroll flowing through him. The rift continued to shrink until, with a sound like tearing fabric in reverse, it sealed completely. "One down," Percy said, already turning toward the next breach. 5 more to go." They moved quickly around the perimeter, Percy sealing each rift with the scroll while Takara, Kenna, and Lina protected him from attacking void creatures. By the time they reached the final breach, Percy was sweating from exertion, the repeated use of the scroll draining his energy. "Last one," Annabeth encouraged, fighting alongside them with her Dracon bone sword. This rift was larger than the others, its edges more stable, as though it had been established longer. As Percy approached, something massive began to emerge, not a void hunter but another sovereign. Its form resembling a twisted, skeletal horse the size of a tank. "The scroll bearer," it acknowledged, fixing multiple eyes on Percy. "We meet as promised." "The dream," Percy realized. "You're the one who showed me the visions. One of many. We are legion across the void." The sovereign fully emerged, its hooves leaving smoking impressions in the grass. "Surrender the scroll. Save your realm further pain." "Not happening," Percy replied, raising the scroll. "In fact, I'm sending you back where you came from." The sovereign reared, towering over them. Then witnessed the consequence of defiance. It slammed its hooves down, sending a shockwave of void energy rippling outward. Where the wave touched, grass withered and earth cracked. Several nearby campers dropped to their knees, gasping as though the energy had sucked the air from their lungs. "Everyone back," Chiron shouted, recognizing the danger. Percy stood his ground, the scroll glowing in his hands. "Takara, Kenna, Lina, like we practiced." The 3 warriors moved into position around Percy, their powers manifesting, Takara's lightning, Kenna's fire, Lina's earth and energy. Through the bond, Percy could feel their strength flowing into him, reinforcing his own abilities. "By blood of the summoner, dimensions obey," Percy recited, pressing his still bleeding thumb to the scroll again. "Close what has opened, seal what has frayed." The sovereign charged, its skeletal form surprisingly fast. Percy directed the combined power of the bond toward the creature and the rift behind it, creating a pulling force that tugged the monster backward. "Fool," the sovereign raged. "Each time you use the scroll, you draw more of our attention." "Good," Percy shouted back. "I want your attention. I want all of you to know what's coming for you." With a final surge of effort, Percy poured everything he had into the scroll. The golden symbols on his arm burned like fire, spreading up to his shoulder and across his chest in a network of glowing lines. The sovereign was dragged back toward the rift, its hooves leaving deep gouges in the earth as it fought against the pull. "A little help here," Percy called, feeling his strength wavering. Annabeth darted forward, driving her sword into the sovereign's leg. The creature howled, its concentration broken for a crucial moment. The combined power of Percy and his rebonded warriors wrenched the sovereign backward into the rift, which sealed with a thunderous clap the moment the creature disappeared. Percy collapsed to his knees, the scroll dropping from his trembling hands. The golden lines receded back into the 3 original symbols on his arm, which pulsed once more before fading to their normal state. Percy. Annabeth was at his side instantly, supporting him. "I'm okay," he managed, though his voice was hoarse. "Just need a minute." Chiron cantered over, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "You sealed all the rifts. Impressive work." "Not just me." Percy nodded toward Takara, Kenna, and Lina, who looked nearly as drained as he felt. "The bond made it possible. And necessary," Takara added. "No single power could have CLOSED dimensional tiers of that magnitude." Chiron looked troubled. "The attacks are escalating much faster than I anticipated. We need to contact Olympus again." "No need," a new voice announced. Herc. Y turned to see Hermes standing a few yards away, his caduceus in hand, winged sandals fluttering at his ankles. The messenger god looked uncharacteristically serious. "Lord Hermes," Chiron bowed. "Zeus has summoned you to Olympus," Hermes said, looking directly at Percy. "All of you, including your dimensional guests. The council has been convened to discuss the crisis." Percy struggled to his feet, retrieving the scroll. "When?" "Now," Hermes replied. "The situation has become impossible to ignore. Dimensional breaches are appearing worldwide, not just here." Percy exchanged glances with Annabeth. "Worldwide," Hermes nodded grimly. "The mist can hardly contain them anymore. Mortals are starting to notice. Zeus is displeased." "When isn't he?" Percy muttered under his breath. "I heard that," Hermes said, though a faint smile flickered across his face. "Come along. The Olympic Express waits for no one, not even heroes who just saved their camp from interdimensional shadow monsters." Percy took a deep breath. Steeling himself. Facing the Olympic Council was never easy, especially when he'd technically disobeyed Zeus's direct order by using the scroll again. But given the circumstances, he hoped even the King of Gods would see reason. "Let's go," he said. "Time to convince the gods that we need more dimensional allies, not fewer." As they followed Hermes toward the camp boundaries, Percy couldn't shake the sovereign's warning. Each use of the scroll drew more attention from the void. But according to the prophecy and everything they'd discovered, the scroll was also their best defense. It was a catch-22 worthy of the gods themselves, and exactly the kind of impossible situation Percy had hoped to avoid during his vacation. Some things never changed. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Bonds of Power. The elevator ride to Olympus was awkward at best. Percy stood between Annabeth and his 3-dimensional allies, trying not to fidget as Hermes tapped his caduceus impatiently against the floor. The mirrored walls reflected their unusual group: a son of Poseidon in jeans and a tattered camp half-blood t-shirt, a daughter of Athena with her blonde hair pulled into a hasty ponytail. 3 women in borrowed clothes who somehow still managed to look otherworldly, and an immortal messenger god who kept checking his phone for updates. "So," Percy ventured, "how bad is it up there?" Hermes glanced up from his phone. "Zeus has destroyed 3 marble columns, Poseidon flooded the western gardens, and Athena has called everyone an idiot at least twice." "So, Tuesday," Annabeth grimaced. "Mom's in a mood. She's researching dimensional theory in the Olympian archives," Hermes explained. "Finding very little, which she hates." The elevator dinged as they reached the 600th floor of the Empire State Building. The doors slid open to reveal the magnificent aerial city of Olympus, its white marble structures gleaming in the perpetual sunshine. But Percy immediately noticed something wrong. Dark clouds gathered at the edges of the divine realm, and the usual bustle of minor gods and nature spirits was subdued. "The barrier's thin even here," Takara observed quietly, her eyes tracking the unnatural storm front. "The gods are maintaining the borders with their own power," Hermes confirmed as he led them along the main causeway. "It's taxing." Percy felt a twinge of guilt. His discovery of the scroll had seemingly accelerated whatever was happening. But if his dream was accurate, the void would have come regardless. The throne room of the gods loomed ahead, its massive columns stretching impossibly high. Even after multiple visits, Percy found the scale intimidating, appropriately so, since it housed beings who could flatten him with a thought. "Ready?" he asked his companions. "Not remotely," Annabeth replied honestly. They're just gods, Kenna said with surprising nonchalance. My realm has those too. Hermes raised an eyebrow. I'd reek 'em. And keeping such comparisons to yourself inside. Zeus is particularly sensitive about his divine uniqueness. The massive gold and silver doors swung open as they approached, revealing the full Olympic Council in session. 14 enormous thrones arranged in a U shape held the major gods, all in their 20-foot divine forms. The tension in the room was palpable, charging the air like an approaching thunderstorm. Zeus occupied the central throne, his pinstriped suit immaculate despite the thunderclouds swirling around his head. To his right sat Hera, her expression cold and evaluating. Poseidon occupied the throne to Zeus's left, his weathered face brightening slightly at the sight of Percy. The remaining Olympians displayed varying degrees of interest and concern. Athena leaned forward on her throne, gray eyes calculating as she studied the newcomers. Ares grinned with anticipation of potential conflict. Aphrodite examined her nails, though her eyes flicked occasionally to the dimensional warriors with obvious curiosity. Apollo strummed his lyre absently. Artemis sat straight-backed and alert, her silver eyes narrowed. Hephaestus tinkered with a small device, seemingly distracted but missing nothing. Demeter tapped her fingers impatiently on her throne's armrest. Dionysus actually looked awake for once, which was concerning in itself. Hermes flashed to his own throne, transitioning smoothly from human size to godly proportions. The room hummed with divine power, making Percy's teeth vibrate slightly. He approached the center of the chamber and bowed, as did Annabeth. After a moment's hesitation, Takara, Kenna, and Lina followed suit. Rise, Zeus commanded, his voice rolling like distant thunder. Perseus Jackson, once again, you stand before this council because of actions that threaten the established order. To be fair, Percy said, straightening, I was just taking a vacation. The scroll found me, not the other way around. Several gods shifted uncomfortably. Poseidon cleared his throat. Perhaps we should allow my son to explain the full situation before passing judgment. Zeus's eyes flashed dangerously, but he nodded. Proceed, then. Explain why you have brought beings from other dimensions into our realm despite my explicit instructions not to expand these connections. Percy recounted the morning's events, the multiple breaches at Camp Half-Blood, the coordinated attack by void creatures, and how he'd used the scroll to seal the rifts with the help of his bonded allies. The void entities are targeting the scroll, he concluded. But they're also afraid of it. They tried to convince me to surrender it, claiming it would make things worse. And you believe otherwise? Athena asked, her tone suggesting she remained unconvinced. I tested it, Percy replied. When I focus on the bonds, I can feel the dimensional barriers. They're stronger where the connections exist, not weaker. A murmur ran through the assembled gods. Athena's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. That aligns with my research, she admitted. Limited though the records are, they suggest that controlled dimensional bridges can reinforce the surrounding barrier fabric. Much as stitches strengthen a tear in cloth. Controlled being the operative word, Zeus pointed out. We know nothing about this scroll or its true purpose. If I may, Takara stepped forward, her voice calm and respectful. In my realm, similar artifacts exist. They were created during the First Void War as a means of alliance between dimensions. The void cannot consume united realms as easily as isolated ones. And we should trust your word? Hera asked coldly, a stranger from another dimension with unknown loyalties. The bond doesn't allow deception between us, Percy interjected. I would know if they were lying. The boy speaks truth, Apollo confirmed unexpectedly. The bond they share carries echoes of ancient oaths, binding and true. Zeus drummed his fingers on his throne's armrest, lightning dancing between his knuckles. These breaches are appearing worldwide. Dimensional intrusions that the mist can barely conceal. Already, mortals speak of shadow creatures and tears in reality. The situation deteriorates faster than anticipated, Athena said. Our power alone cannot maintain the barriers indefinitely. Then what do you suggest? Zeus demanded. Athena met her father's gaze directly. I believe we must consider the prophecy delivered to Camp Half-Blood. 20 bonds to forge, 20 realms to stand. The wording implies necessity, not choice. You suggest we allow this demigod to form 17 more of these connections? Hera asked incredulously. To bring more outsiders into our realm. I suggest, Athena replied carefully, that the alternative may be worse. Silence fell over the council. Percy exchanged glances with Annabeth, who gave him an encouraging nod. There's something else, Percy said. The Void Lords contacted me directly, through a dream. They showed me a vision of Earth consumed, completely destroyed. They're not just making random attacks. They have a plan. Void Lords, Poseidon repeated gravely. Entities that exist in the nothingness between realms. Ancient texts mention them, though most believed them to be theoretical. They're very real, Lina spoke up. In my realm, we've fought their incursions for generations. They consume everything: matter, energy, magic, even time itself. And why would such entities target Earth specifically? Artemis asked. Kenna answered, they target all realms eventually. Yours may be particularly appealing because of its divine energy concentrations. Olympus, Annabeth realized. They want to consume the seat of the gods, which would destabilize the entire dimensional region. Athena concluded, creating a cascading collapse that would make surrounding realms vulnerable. Zeus rose from his throne, causing everyone to step back instinctively. The king of gods towered over them, his electric blue eyes stormy with thought and barely contained power. The evidence suggests action is required, he acknowledged reluctantly. But I remain unconvinced that forming more of these bonds is the answer. Such connections could be exactly what these Void Lords want, more doorways into our realm. Not if we control the doors, Percy argued. The scroll doesn't just create connections, it regulates them. I used it to close the rifts this morning. At significant cost to yourself, Annabeth pointed out quietly. You could barely stand afterward. Which is why he needs more bonds, Takara said. Each connection adds power, resilience. Alone, even a strong summoner can maintain only a few bonds. Together, a full complement of 20W. Old allow for greater control and strength. Zeus considered this, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to address the full council. We shall put it to a vote. Those in favor of allowing Perseus Jackson to continue forming these dimensional bonds under Olympian supervision. Poseidon's hand rose immediately, followed by Athena's, surprising Percy. Apollo joined them, then Hermes, Artemis after a moment's hesitation. And finally Hephaestus, who looked up from his device long enough to raise his massive hand. Those opposed. Hera's hand shot up, along with Ares, Dionysus, and Demeter. Aphrodite abstained, examining her reflection in a compact mirror. 6-4 in favor, Zeus noted. With 2 abstentions. He himself had not voted, Percy noticed. Very well, the king of gods declared. Perseus Jackson, you are granted conditional permission to form additional bonds as necessary to combat this void threat. However, his voice hardened, each new bond must be reported immediately to Olympus. You will be assigned a divine observer to monitor your activities and ensure these connections do not threaten our realm further. I'll do it, Apollo volunteered immediately, grinning. I've been working on some haikus about dimensional travel. Zeus pinched the bridge of his nose. Artemis, you will assign one of your hunters to observe Jackson. As you wish, Father, Artemis agreed with a nod. Furthermore, Zeus continued, you will prioritize sealing breaches and eliminating void incursions. The formation of new bonds should be a last resort, not a first option. Understood, Percy agreed, relieved they'd gotten permission at all. One final condition, Zeus's eyes flashed. Should these bonds prove to endanger Olympus or Earth beyond what the void already threatens, I reserve the right to sever them by whatever means necessary. The implicit threat wasn't lost on Percy, but he nodded anyway. Fair enough. Zeus seemed satisfied. Council dismissed. Poseidon, Athena, remain. We have matters to discuss regarding the reinforcement of divine barriers. As the gods began to flash away or shrink down to human size, Percy felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find his father standing there, now at a more reasonable 12 feet tall. A moment, son, Poseidon said, his voice like waves on a shore. I'll catch up, Percy told the others, who moved toward the throne room exit. Poseidon reduced himself further to merely human size, though his presence remained unmistakably divine. His weathered face showed concern mingled with pride. Quote, you've stumbled into something significant, he said without preamble. Even by your standards. Percy managed a weak smile. I was really trying for a normal vacation this time. Normality was never your destiny. Poseidon glanced toward Zeus and Athena, deep in conversation across the room. The situation is worse than Zeus admitted to the full council. The divine barriers around Olympus itself have been under attack for months. We believed it was some new enemy, perhaps remnants of Gaia's forces. Now we know differently. The void has been targeting Olympus specifically. Poseidon nodded. The seat of divine power would be a feast for entities that consume energy. If Olympus falls, the mortal world would soon follow. Great, Percy muttered. So no pressure. I have something for you. Poseidon held out his hand. In his palm materialized a small object, a coin-sized disc of what looked like abalone shell, etched with trident symbols around its edge. This token will allow you to contact me directly, should you face something beyond your capability. Percy accepted the disc, feeling its cool weight. Thanks, Dad. Use it wisely. I cannot directly interfere with other dimensions. Ancient laws forbid it, but I can reinforce you when you're in my domain. The sea. Any body of water, Poseidon clarified. Fresh or salt, water exists in all realms, in all dimensions. It's one of the universal constants. Percy pocketed the token carefully. I'll remember that. Poseidon's expression softened slightly. You've grown into your power admirably, Percy. But this challenge exceeds anything you've faced before. The void is not like gods or titans or giants. It doesn't think as we do. It simply consumes. I've noticed, Percy said dryly. Be cautious with these bonds, Poseidon continued, his tone turning serious again. Each connection reshapes you subtly, adds aspects that weren't there before. Too many too quickly could change you. Change me how? Poseidon hesitated. Dimensional energy affects mortals differently than gods. Watch yourself. If you begin to feel disconnected from your own reality, pull back. Before Percy could ask what exactly that meant, Zeus called across the throne room. Poseidon, your input is required. The sea god squeezed Percy's shoulder once. Trust your instincts. They've served you well so far. Then he walked back toward his brother and Athena, growing in size with each step. Percy rejoined the others outside the throne room, finding them in conversation with a teenage girl in silver hunting clothes, one of Artemis's hunters. Percy, Annabeth said, this is Talia's lieutenant, Phoebe. She's been assigned as our observer. Phoebe didn't look thrilled with the assignment. Lady Artemis believes SI can be useful while keeping an eye on your dimensional activities. We're honored to have a hunter with us, Percy said diplomatically. Phoebe snorted. Save it, Jackson. I'm here because you'll need someone who can track across multiple terrains. Talia said you're competent in a fight but get lost finding the bathroom. That was one time, Percy protested. And the labyrinth was specifically designed to confuse people. If I may interrupt, Takara interjected smoothly, we should return to your camp. The sealed rifts will only remain closed temporarily without reinforcement. Percy nodded, the seriousness of their situation reasserting itself. Hermes mentioned breaches worldwide. We need to figure out where to focus our efforts. Artemis provided information, Phoebe said, producing a silver tablet from her pack. Coordinates of the largest dimensional intrusions, ranked by severity. The screen displayed a global map dotted with pulsing red points of varying sizes. The largest concentration appeared over North America, with significant hotspots in Greece, Egypt, and Japan. That's a lot of breaches, Percy said, dismayed. And growing, Phoebe confirmed grimly. New ones appear hourly. Annabeth studied the map thoughtfully. We need transportation that doesn't leave dimensional traces for void creatures to follow. Regular travel between these points would create a trail they could exploit. My hunters have been authorized to provide transport, Phoebe said. Lady Artemis's silver chariots move between moonlight paths, which the void cannot easily track. That solves one problem, Percy acknowledged, but we still need to prioritize which breaches to tackle first. Lina pointed to a large red dot in the center of the United States. This one, located in what you call New Mexico. The energy signature suggests a major incursion point, possibly with a sovereign already emerged. How can you tell? Annabeth asked, impressed. Forest real. warriors are trained as dimensional trackers, Lina explained. The pattern of disruption indicates a stable breach rather than a temporary tear. Percy met Annabeth's eyes, seeing his own determination reflected there. New Mexico it is. I shall inform Lady Artemis, Phoebe said, touching a silver band on her wrist. The chariot will meet us on Half-Blood Hill in 20 minutes. As they left the throne room, Percy noticed Kenna staring at the darkening clouds encroaching on Olympus's borders. The fire wielder's expression was troubled. Something wrong? He asked. Kenna pulled her gaze away from the unnatural storm. In my realm, when such darkness gathers, it usually precedes a major void assault. Your gods are powerful, but they've never faced this enemy before. You think Olympus is in danger? I think nowhere is truly safe, she replied. The void is patient but relentless. It tests defenses, finds weaknesses, then strikes where least expected. Percy felt the weight of the scroll in his pocket and the shell token from his father. Both felt simultaneously reassuring and burdensome. Then we'd better get moving, he said. The sooner we understand what we're dealing with, the better prepared we'll be when the real attack comes. If you believe that was not a real attack, Kenna murmured, you have much to learn about the void. The silver chariot of Artemis streaked through the night sky, pulled by 4 magnificent stags whose hooves seemed to run on moonlight itself. Inside, Percy and his companions held tightly to silver handrails as Phoebe guided the vehicle with practiced ease. How much longer? Percy called over the rush of wind. 10 minutes, Phoebe replied. We're following a moonlight path directly to the coordinates. Percy glanced at his companions. Annabeth stood beside him, her blonde hair whipping around her face as she studied a map of the region. Takara, Kenna, and Lina had positioned themselves at different points in the chariot, their expressions alert for any sign of pursuit. Despite being in a completely foreign realm, they displayed remarkable adaptability, a trait Percy was increasingly grateful for. The chariot descended through wisps of cloud, revealing the moonlit landscape of New Mexico below. Desert stretched in all directions, broken by the occasional rock formation or sparse vegetation. But what immediately drew everyone's attention was the pulsing tear in reality that hung suspended above a mesa, a vertical rift perhaps 30 feet tall, leaking darkness like ink in water. That doesn't look good, Percy observed. The breach is fully stabilized, Lina confirmed grimly. It's been open for some time. As they drew closer, details became clearer. The area around the rift was transformed. Desert sand had turned to black glass. And what vegetation had existed was now twisted into unnatural shapes that seemed to bend toward the tear like supplicants. Most concerning were the structures that had been erected around the rift, what looked like obsidian pillars arranged in a precise geometric pattern. They're building something, Annabeth said, her analytical mind immediately recognizing purpose in the arrangement. Those pillars are creating a framework around the breach. A permanent doorway, Takara realized. They're trying to stabilize the rift beyond natural capacity. Phoebe guided the chariot to land a safe distance from the site. As they disembarked, Percy felt an immediate pressure, not physical, but a kind of psychic weight that pressed against his mind. The scroll in his pocket pulsed in response, almost like a warning. Everyone else feel that? He asked quietly. Nods all around confirmed he wasn't imagining it. Void pressure, Kenna explained. The longer a rift stays open, the more it affects the surrounding environment. They advanced cautiously toward the mesa, using rock formations for cover. As they crested a ridge that gave them a clear view of the site, Percy's breath caught. Dozens of void creatures moved purposefully around the obsidian pillars. Unlike the hunters and sovereigns they'd encountered before, these entities appeared almost humanoid. Shadowy figures with 2 long limbs and featureless faces that occasionally shifted to reveal glimpses of stars where eyes should be. Void architects, Takara whispered. They design and build structures that allow the void to maintain presence in living realms. Great, Percy muttered. Interdimensional evil construction workers. Not just workers, Lina cautioned. They're highly intelligent and dangerous. Each one controls multiple hunter-class entities. As if to illustrate her point, several of the now familiar shark-like hunters patrolled the perimeter, moving with the jerky precision of puppets. There must be 30 architects, Annabeth estimated. Plus at least twice that many hunters. Too many for a direct assault. Percy studied the site, looking for weaknesses. The obsidian pillars formed a perfect circle around the rift, with smaller structures between them that pulsed with dark energy. At the base of each pillar, something glowed with an anti-light that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Those power sources, he pointed. If we take those out, would it destabilize whatever they're building? Takara nodded. Possibly. But we'd need to hit all of them simultaneously. Or the architects would simply redirect power through the remaining nodes. We need a distraction, Phoebe suggested. Something to draw the hunters away while a smaller team targets the power sources. Or, Kenna said with a dangerous smile, we could add some reinforcements to our side. All eyes turned to Percy, who understood immediately what she meant. The scroll. New bonds. Zeus said that should be a last resort, he reminded them. Look at that construction, Annabeth countered. Once completed, it could allow something far worse than sovereigns to cross over. I'd call this urgent enough to qualify. Percy weighed their options. The situation was clearly dire, but forming new bonds carried its own risks, both to himself, as his father had warned, and potential. Why to the stability of the barriers if not done correctly? The bond requires a clear need, Takara reminded him. The scroll responds to necessity, not convenience. Decision made, Percy withdrew the scroll from his pocket. The ancient papyrus seemed to hum with anticipation, the symbols along its edges glowing faintly in the darkness. How do I target specific abilities? Percy asked. If we're doing this, I want skills that complement what we already have. Focus on what you need, Lina instructed. The scroll connects to realms with warriors who can fulfill that need. Percy closed his eyes, concentrating. They needed stealth capability, someone who could move unseen. They needed offensive power that could target multiple enemies simultaneously. And they needed a strategist, Somio. Nay, who could coordinate their movements against superior numbers. He opened his eyes and unrolled the scroll. The familiar golden script rearranged itself, forming new patterns. By blood renewed, the circle grows. 3 more bonds to face these foes. Percy drew Riptide and made a small cut on his palm, then pressed it to the scroll. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The golden script flared blindingly bright, and the symbols on Percy's arm burned as 3 new marks appeared alongside the originals. The scroll pulled energy from him in a rushing torrent that left him momentarily dizzy. The air around them shimmered, reality folding in 3 distinct places. Unlike the violent tears created by the void, these openings appeared as clean doorways of light, 1 deep purple, 1 silver blue, and 1 emerald green. From the purple doorway emerged a woman with skin like polished obsidian and hair that seemed to be made of living shadow. She wore close-fitting armor of a material Percy couldn't identify, with intricate patterns that shifted across its surface. Most striking were her eyes, entirely black except for pinpricks of white light, like stars in a night sky. Summoner, she acknowledged Percy with a formal nod. I am Nyx of the Shadow Realm. Your need has called me. The silver-blue doorway rippled as a second figure stepped through, a man with metallic silver hair and eyes of the same shade. His lean frame was encased in what looked like liquid metal armor that flowed and adjusted with his movements. Circuitry patterns glowed beneath the surface of both his armor and his exposed skin. Summoner accepted, he stated in a precise tone. Designation: Krios, Techno Realm. Function: Multi-Target Engagement Specialist. The third doorway, emerald green, revealed a woman with copper-toned skin and intricate green tattoos that covered her exposed arms and face in patterns reminiscent of circuit boards. Her eyes shifted color continuously, cycling through shades of green as she took in her surroundings with preternatural awareness. She wore what appeared to be living armor, comprised of overlapping plates that resembled leaves but moved with mechanical precision. Summoner, she greeted Percy. Her voice melodic but authoritative. I am Talia of the Nexus Realm. Strategic operations are my specialty. Percy blinked, slightly overwhelmed by the 3 new arrivals. Welcome to Earth. I'm Percy Jackson. We know who you are, Nyx replied, her star-filled eyes disconcerting as they fixed on him. The bond shares essential knowledge. Threat assessment already underway, Krios added. His gaze now fixed on the construction site below. Void Architects. 34. Hunter-class entities. 67. Power nodes. 12. Optimal approach vectors calculated. You called wisely, Talia commented, studying the battlefield with eyes that had shifted to a deep forest green. This situation requires specialized intervention. Takara, Kenna, and Lina stepped forward to greet the newcomers. There was a moment of tension as the warriors sized each other up, then a subtle relaxation as they recognized kindred spirits despite their different origins. 6 bonds. Takara observed to Percy. You're adapting well to the energy demands. Percy wasn't so sure. He felt a strange buzzing beneath his skin, as though his body was struggling to contain the new connections. The 6 symbols on his arm pulsed in unison, each one representing a bridge to another dimension that channeled power both ways. I'll manage, he said, hoping it was true. Right now, we need a plan. Talia of the Nexus Realm stepped forward. I've analyzed the construction. The architects are building a dimensional amplifier, a structure designed to widen the breach exponentially once activated. It's approximately 70% complete. How long until it's finished? Annabeth asked. At current work rate, 3 hours, 22 minutes, Krios supplied. And once it's active, Percy pressed. Talia's eyes cycled to a dark emerald. It would create a breach large enough for a Void Lord to partially manifest. Not physical entry, but enough presence to exert direct influence in this realm. That can't happen, Takara stated flatly. Agreed, Percy said. So how do we stop it? Talia gestured, and to everyone's surprise, a 3-dimensional holographic model of the site appeared in the air before them, projected from her tattooed palm. The power nodes are key, she indicated the glowing points at the base of each obsidian pillar. They drive energy from the void itself to fuel the construction. Destroying them will collapse the framework, but as noted, they must be neutralized simultaneously. I can handle stealth approach, Nyx offered. My shadow walking allows undetected movement. My drones can target multiple nodes concurrently, Krios added, his armored forearm shifting to reveal what looked like tiny metallic insects nested inside. The hunters will be drawn to any direct attack, Lina observed. We'll need a significant distraction. Percy glanced at Kenna, who grinned back with anticipation. Distraction is my specialty. We'll need 3 teams, Talia decided. Team 1. Nyx, Krios, and Lina will target the power nodes. Team 2. Percy, Takara, and myself will disrupt the rift itself once the power is down. Team 3. Kenna, Annabeth, and Phoebe create the distraction to draw attention away from both critical operations. What about the architects themselves? Annabeth questioned. They're intelligent. They'll recognize a coordinated attack. Leave them to me, Nyx said, her star eyes gleaming. Shadow Realm warriors specialize in neutralizing command units. Percy looked around the circle, seeing determination on every face. 6-dimensional warriors plus Annabeth and Phoebe. It still seemed like long odds against the forces below, but their specialized abilities might give them the edge they needed. Everyone clear on their roles? He asked. Nods all around. Then let's move. We've got a dimensional amplifier to destroy. Team 3 moved first. Kenna, Annabeth, and Phoebe circled to the eastern side of the mesa, positioning themselves where the majority of hunter-class entities patrolled. Ready? Kenna asked, flames already dancing across her fingertips. Annabeth drew her Dracon bone sword. As I'll ever be. Phoebe knocked 3 arrows simultaneously in her silver bow. Just give the signal. Kenna's eyes gleamed with golden fire as she reached deep into her power. Flames erupted around her in a spiraling column that shot skyward, illuminating the desert night like a beacon. She thrust her hands forward, and the fire divided into dozens of flaming projectiles. It rained down on the outer perimeter of the construction site. The effect was immediate. Void hunters screeched and converged on the attack, followed by several of the architect entities who gestured commandingly. The site erupted into chaos exactly as planned. Phase 2, Annabeth called. Phoebe loosed her arrows, each one trailing silver moonlight as it split into multiple projectiles mid-flight. They struck with pinpoint accuracy, creating a chain of explosions that added to the confusion. Now we run, Kenna announced cheerfully, already sprinting along the ridge to draw the pursuit away from the mesa. Dozens of hunters broke from the main group to give chase, exactly as intended. Meanwhile, Team 1 used the distraction to approach from the opposite side. Nyx moved like her namesake, her body dissolving into shadow as she flowed across the desert floor with Lina and Krios close behind. 12 nodes, Nyx whispered once they reached the base of the mesa. 4 each. Kree. Osa's armor rippled as panels opened to release a swarm of tiny metallic drones, each no larger than a hummingbird. Targeting systems engaged. Awaiting synchronization. Lina touched the ground. Send. Ing thin tendrils of green energy snaking through the soil toward the obsidian pillars. I can sense the power flow. The nodes are connected in a specific sequence. Breaking it requires perfect timing. Nyx nodded. I'll mark the sequence. Follow my lead. She dissolved into shadow again, becoming nearly invisible as she moved toward the nearest pillar. Only the faintest outline betrayed her sense as she examined the glowing anti-light at its base. This technology is advanced, she communicated through their bond. Void corruption of the 3rd degree. Proceed with caution. Krios direct. Ted his swarm of micro-drones to specific positions, each one attaching to a power node and extending delicate filaments into the strange material. Infiltration successful. Ready to disrupt on command. Lina positioned herself at the final set of nodes, her blades glowing with verdant energy. In position. Team 2, Percy, Takara, and Talia, waited at the designated position, monitoring the situation through their bond connections. Percy could feel the distinct presence of each warrior in his mind now, 6 different energy signatures that pulsed with purpose and power. The distraction is working, Takara observed, watching Kenna's fire display draw away a significant portion of the void forces. Team 1 is in position, Talia reported, her eyes now a bright analytical green. Awaiting your command, Summoner. Percy still wasn't used to being called that. Give the signal when everyone's ready. He could feel the power of the rift even at this distance, a wrongness that pulled at his senses like a black hole tugging at light. The scroll in his pocket pulsed in counterpoint, as though responding to its opposite. Team's ready, Talia announced after a moment. Executing in 3, 2, 1. Across the site, coordinated action erupted simultaneously. Krios's micro-drones activated, sending disruptive pulses into each power node they'd attached to. Lina struck with her blades, severing the energy connections at her assigned positions. Nyx emerged from shadow directly behind 4 void architects, her hands plunging into their nebulous forms to extract what appeared to be crystalline cores. The effects cascaded immediately. The power nodes flared with unstable energy, then began to collapse inward. The obsidian pillars cracked and shuddered. Void architects turned from pursuing Team 3. Their featureless faces somehow conveying alarm as they rushed to stabilize their creation. Now, Talia called. Percy, Takara, and Talia sprinted toward the central rift, which pulsed erratically as its power supply fluctuated. Percy pulled out the scroll as they ran, already feeling its response to the nearby dimensional tear. Cover me, he shouted as they reached the base of the rift. Takara immediately unleashed lightning in a protective circle around them, forcing back void entities that attempted to intervene. Talia raised her hands, and the tattoo on her skin glowed brightly as she projected a greenish barrier that further reinforced their position. Percy unrolled the scroll, which practically vibrated with energy now. The golden script rearranged itself once more. By blood of the summoner, dimensions obey. Close what has opened, seal what has frayed. The same words as before, but as Percy recited them, he felt a much stronger response. The combined power of 6 bonds flowing through him into the scroll. The symbols on his arm burned like fire, spreading across his chest and back in a network of golden lines. The rift resisted, RKNESS pushing back against the scroll's power. Percy gritted his teeth, pouring more energy into the command. His vision blurred, the world reducing to 2 opposing forces, the consuming void and the connecting scroll. More power, he gasped. Takara placed her hand on his shoulder, channeling her lightning directly into him. The electricity should have killed him instantly, but instead, it flowed through the bond network, amplifying the scroll's effect. Talia did the same from his other side, her strategic energy providing framework and direction to their combined power. Through the bonds, Percy could feel the others contributing as well. Kenna's fire, Lina's earth energy, Nyx's shadow control, and Krios's techno power, all flowing into him and through him to the scroll. The rift began to close from the top down, reality knitting itself back together with visible effort. The void architects frantically worked to counter the effect, their elongated limbs gesturing in complex pattern as they attempted to stabilize their failing construction. Just as victory seemed within reach, something massive began to emerge from the rift, a darkness deeper than the night sky, with hints of a form so vast that Percy's mind struggled to comprehend it. Tendrils of anti-light extended toward him, reaching for the scroll with obvious intent. "Little summoner," a voice like the death of stars echoed in Percy's mind. "Did you think we would not prepare for you?" One tendril lashed out, faster than thought, striking Percy across the chest. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, not physical but existential, as though a piece of his very being had been torn away. He stumbled, nearly dropping the scroll. "Percy!" Takara shouted, redoubling her power input. The entity emerging from the rift continued to materialize, its vast form beginning to block out the stars overhead. "The scroll belongs in the void. It is the key we have sought for eons." "Not happening," Percy managed through clenched teeth. He reached into his pocket with his free hand, fingers closing around the abalone shell token his father had given him. "Dad," he whispered, "if you can hear me, I could use some help with the water thing right about now." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Percy felt a surge of familiar power, the pull in his gut that he experienced when calling upon large bodies of water. But there was no water in this desert. Just sand and rock and understanding dawned. Water existed in all things, his father had said. Even the driest desert contained moisture, in the air, in the soil, in living organisms. Percy closed his eyes and reached out with his senses, feeling for any trace of water. At first, there seemed to be nothing, but then he detected it, tiny amounts of moisture scattered throughout the environment. Individually insignificant, but collectively. With a shout of effort, Percy pulled. Water responded from every direction, droplets from the air, moisture from cacti and desert plants. Even microscopic amounts from the soil itself. It gathered around him in a swirling mist that grew denser by the second. The void entity recoiled slightly, its tendrils withdrawing from the unexpected phenomenon. "What is this?" "Something from my realm," Percy answered, directing the accumulated water toward the rift. The moisture formed into a compressed jet that struck the emerging darkness with surprising force. Where it touched, the entity's form hissed and destabilized, as though water was anathema to its very nature. Percy seized the opportunity, channeling the combine. D-power of all six bonds through the scroll once more. By blood of the summoner, dimensions obey. Close what has opened, seal what has frayed. The rift constricted violently, forcing the partially emerged entity back. It thrashed in obvious pain as the water continued to disrupt its form. "This is not the end, summoner," it promised as it retreated. "We will have the scroll. We will have all realms. It is inevitable." With a final surge of power that nearly drove Percy to his knees, the rift sealed completely. The golden network of lines across his body flared blindingly bright, then receded back to the six symbols on his arm. Silence fell over the mesa. The obsidian pillars had collapsed into rubble. The void architects and hunters had either been destroyed or had fled when their creation failed. Only the black glass covering the desert floor remained as evidence of what had transpired. Percy swayed on his feet, utterly drained. Takara caught him before he could fall. "Easy," she murmured. That was significantly more power than any summoner should channel alone. "Did we win?" Percy asked groggily. "The rift is closed," Talia confirmed, her eyes cycling through colors as she scanned their surroundings. "The dimensional amplifier is destroyed. For now, this breach is contained." The rest of their allies converged on their position. Annabeth looked scraped and bruised but otherwise intact. Phoebe limped slightly, a gash visible on her leg. Kenna appeared energized rather than exhausted, flames still dancing in her hair. Nyx moved with liquid grace, shadows clinging to her form. Krios's armor had reconfigured, several panels damaged but self-repairing. Lina carried what appeared to be a crystalline shard, examining it with careful interest. "That," Annabeth declared, catching her breath, "was too close. We destroyed 31 architects," Nyx reported. 3 escaped, along with approximately 20 hunter-class entities. "I obtained this," Lina held up the crystal shard. "A core fragment from one of the architects. It contains information. Plans, perhaps." Krios extended his hand, his fingers transforming into delicate instruments. "Permission to analyze." Lina handed over the shard, which Krios integrated into a compartment in his forearm. His silver eyes flickered rapidly as data streamed through his systems. Fascinating, he murmured. This isn't merely a power amplifier. It's a beacon. A beacon, Percy repeated, still leaning heavily on Takara for support. For what? For who? Krios corrected. This entire structure was designed to signal someone, or something, specific. A targeted invitation. The entity that began to emerge, Talia deduced. A Void Lord. Not just any Void Lord, Krios continued, his expression troubled. The data references, the consuming one. Some kind of leader or superior entity. Percy exchanged glances with his allies. That can't be good. It isn't, Nyx confirmed, her star eyes somber. In Shadow Realm legends, the consuming one is the first and greatest of the Void Lords, the entity that discovered how to devour dimensional energy itself. Why target Earth specifically? Annabeth wondered. The scroll, Talia said, looking at Percy. According to this data, they've been searching for it across multiple dimensions. They believe it's the key to something they call the final consumption. A chill ran down Percy's spine. Define final consumption. Unknown, Krios admitted. The data fragment is incomplete. But whatever it is, this entire construction was just one of many being built across your world to facilitate it. Many. Percy felt a fresh wave of dread. How many are we talking about? Krios's expression was grim. Based on the architectural plans contained here, at least 12 major sites globally, with dozens of smaller support structures. The map Phoebe showed us, Annabeth realized. Those weren't just random breaches, they're all part of a coordinated plan. Phoebe activated her silver tablet, the global map appearing with its constellation of red dots. If each major hotspot represents one of these amplifiers, then we've only stopped one of 12, Percy finished. And we barely managed that with 6 bonds and everything we had. The implications settled heavily over the group. What they'd just faced wasn't a random incursion or opportunistic attack, it was part of a calculated invasion with a specific goal. We need to report this to Olympus, Annabeth said. The gods need to know what we're dealing with. Percy nodded tiredly. And we need to prepare for the next site. If they're all like this one. They won't be, Talia interrupted, her eyes now a deep analytical green. Strategic logic dictates they'll adapt their defenses based on what happened here. Each site will present different challenges. Then we adapt too, Percy decided. He straightened, drawing on reserves of determination if not energy. We'll rest, recover, then hit the next site before they can complete it. Which one? Phoebe asked, looking at the map. Percy studied the glowing red dots, considering. That one, he pointed to a large concentration over Chicago. It's in the US, which means we can get there quickly, and it's one of the bigger signatures. Chicago it is, Annabeth agreed. But Percy, you need rest first. That level of power channeling. She trailed off, concern evident in her expression. Percy wanted to argue but couldn't deny his exhaustion. Every cell in his body felt drained, and the 6 bond symbols on his arm pulsed with a dull ache. Whatever his father had warned about, the changes that could come from too many bonds too quickly, he was definitely feeling something. A few hours, he conceded. Then we move. As they made their way back to Artemis's chariot, Percy felt Krios fall into step beside him. Summoner, the Techno-Realm warrior said quietly. A private observation, if permitted. Go ahead, Percy replied. Too tired to stand on formality. Your biological readings during the scroll activation exceeded sustainable parameters, Krios stated matter-of-factly. The hum and form is not designed to channel multi-dimensional energy at such volume. Meaning each use of the scroll at full capacity damages your physical structure incrementally. 6 bonds are already approaching your limit. 20 would. He didn't finish the thought, but he didn't need to. Percy understood the implication clearly. The prophecy called for 20 bonds, but his body might not survive forming or using that many. Let's focus on the next site, Percy said, pushing the concern aside for now. One problem at a time. Krios nodded, but his silver eyes remained troubled. As you wish, Summoner. The hunter's chariot returned them to Camp Half-Blood just as dawn broke over Long Island Sound. Percy had managed a fitful sleep during the journey, but awakened feeling far from refreshed. The new bonds hummed in his awareness, 6 distinct connections that both empowered and drained him simultaneously. Chiron and several senior counselors waited for them at the big house. Having been alerted to their return, the centaur's expression was grave as they gathered around the ping-pong table that had hosted so many war councils before. "I see you've expanded your alliance," he observed, noting the 3 new dimensional warriors who stood with quiet alertness around the room. Percy made quick introductions, then summarized what they'd discovered and accomplished in New Mexico. When he mentioned the Consuming One and the network of amplifiers being constructed globally, Chiron's face darkened with concern. "This is grave news indeed," the centaur said. "If these structures are being built to facilitate the entry of a supreme void entity, we have to stop them all," Percy finished. "And soon. I've already reported to Olympus," Phoebe added. "Lady Arte, Ms. is informing the council as we speak." Clarice, who represented the Ares cabin, leaned forward. "So what's the plan, Jackson? You can't be everywhere at once." "We prioritize," Percy replied. Quote, "Take down the largest construction sites first, working from the ones closest to completion. While the gods maintain the divine barriers," Annabeth added. "It has to be a coordinated effort." "And the camp's defenses?" Chiron asked. "The barrier held yesterday, but if these attacks intensify, I may have a solution for that." Talia of the Nexus realm stepped forward. Her eyes cycled to a deep forest green as she projected a holographic model of Camp Half-Blood from her tattooed palm. "With your permission, I can implement a dimensional reinforcement grid that would supplement your existing magical boundaries." Chiron studied the projection with interest. "How would this work?" "By establishing resonance nodes at key points around your perimeter," Talia explained, highlighting specific locations in her model. "These would create a secondary barrier specifically attuned to resist void incursions. The materials required are common enough in this realm," Krios added. "Though, some components would need modification. The Hephaestus cabin could help with that," Nissa Barrera offered from her position near the door. Percy felt a surge of gratitude for his allies' initiative. Their specialized knowledge might be the edge that allowed them to weather this crisis. "Do it," he authorized. "Anything that strengthens our defenses is worth implementing." Chiron nodded agreement. "Work with our campers to establish these reinforcements immediately. Meanwhile, we must prepare for your next expedition." As the meeting continued, Percy found himself struggling to focus. The symbols on his arm pulsed uncomfortably, and occasionally his vision would blur, showing him momentary glimpses of other places, presumably the home realms of his bonded warriors. Annabeth noticed his distraction. "Percy, you okay?" "Fine," he assured her automatically. "Just tired." She clearly didn't believe him but didn't press the issue in front of everyone. The meeting concluded with assignments distributed. Talia, Krios, and the Hephaestus campers would work on camp defenses, while the others prepared for the Chicago mission scheduled to begin that evening after Percy had rested. As the group dispersed, Chiron gestured for Percy to remain behind. When they were alone except for Annabeth, the centaur fixed Percy with a penetrating look. "How are you really feeling, my boy?" Percy hesitated, then decided honesty was necessary. "Like I'm being pulled in 6 different directions at once. The bonds, they're intense." "I feared as much," Chiron sighed. "The ancient texts mention this effect. Dimensional summoners must develop specific mental disciplines to manage multiple connections." "Great," Percy muttered. "More training." "Necessary training," Chiron corrected gently. "Without it, the bonds could overwhelm your sense of self." "What exactly does that mean?" Annabeth asked, concern evident in her voice. Chiron's expression was grave. "It means that with each new bond, Percy absorbs aspects of that dimension's nature. In small doses, this merely enhances his abilities. In excess, I could lose myself," Percy finished, remembering his father's warning. "Become something that isn't quite Percy Jackson anymore." "Precisely," Chiron confirmed. "The prophecy calls for 20 bonds, but forming them too quickly without proper mental preparation would be dangerous." "How long does this training normally take?" Percy asked. "Years, typically." Percy laughed hollowly. "We don't have years. We barely have days. Then we adapt," Annabeth said firmly. "We find a way to accelerate the process." Chiron nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps your dimensional allies can assist. They must have knowledge of how summoners in their realms manage these bonds." "I'll ask them," Percy agreed. But first, I need that rest we talked about. Everything looks a bit wobbly right now. Annabeth took his arm, supporting him as he stood. Come on, seaweed brain. A few hours of actual sleep will help. As they left the big house, Percy couldn't shake the feeling that sleep alone wouldn't solve his problems. The scroll in his pocket seemed heavier than before, its power both tempting and terrifying. 6 bonds already strained his capacity, how could he possibly manage 20? Yet the alternative, allowing the void to complete its network of amplifiers and ring the consuming one into their world, was unthinkable. One problem at a time, he reminded himself. Rest first, then Chicago, then whatever came next. The life of a demigod never got simpler. Percy dreamed of water, not the familiar ocean of his father's domain, but something different, a vast, interconnected network of currents that flowed between realms. Each current carried distinct energy: Takara's electric blue, Kenna's fiery gold, Lina's verdant green, Nyx's star-filled purple, Krios's metallic silver, and Talia's shifting emerald. In the dream, Percy floated at the confluence of these currents, feeling them flow through and around him. Rather than fighting their pull, he allowed himself to move with them, discovering that they formed a complex but navigable system. Balance, not resistance. A voice that sounded like his father's advised. The sea does not fight the moon's pull, it dances with it. Percy experimented, mentally directing the currents. To his surprise, they responded, merging or separating according to his will. The strain he had felt while awake diminished as he found the natural harmony between the different energies. Each bond has its place, the voice continued. Each dimension its purpose. You are not meant to contain them, but to conduct them, like water flowing through channels you design. The realization clicked into place. Percy had been trying to manage each bond individually, treating them as separate connections that he had to monitor and control simultaneously. But they weren't meant to be isolated. They were parts of a unified system that could reinforce and balance each other. In the dream state, Percy rearranged the flowing energies, creating a circular pattern where each current supported and enhanced the others. The strain vanished completely, replaced by a harmonious hum of power that felt sustainable, even expandable. Remember this feeling, the voice advised as the dream began to fade. Water always finds its balance. Percy awoke feeling surprisingly refreshed. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the Poseidon cabin, indicating he'd slept for several hours. More importantly, the uncomfortable pulsing of the bond symbols had subsided, replaced by a steady, manageable warmth. He sat up, examining his arm. The 6 symbols remained, but something had changed in how they felt, less like separate demands on his energy and more like interconnected aspects of a single system. The dream, he murmured. It actually helped. Percy closed his eyes, focusing on the bonds as he had in the dream. Sure enough, he could sense the distinct energy signature of each warrior, but now he could also perceive how they naturally aligned with each other. Takara's lightning complementing Kenna's fire, Nyx's shadows balancing Lina's earth energy, Krios's precision enhancing Talia's strategy. A knock at the door interrupted his meditation. Percy, you awake? Annabeth called. Come in, he answered, standing and stretching. Annabeth entered, followed by Takara, whose expression showed mild surprise as she studied Percy. You've stabilized the bond network, she observed. I can feel the difference. Percy nodded. I had a dream, more of a lesson. Really, I think my dad helped. Divine intervention has its uses, Annabeth said with a small smile. You look better. I feel better, Percy confirmed. Still not 100%. But not like I'm being torn apart anymore. The balance you've established is impressive, Takara noted. Most summoners take months to achieve this level of integration. Having a sea god for a father probably helps, Percy said. The dream was all about water and currents and flow. The metaphor suits you, Takara agreed. And it will make adding future bonds more manageable. Percy's mood sobered at the reminder of their ongoing mission. Speaking of which, what's the status on Chicago? That's why we came to get you, Annabeth replied. Talia, our Talia, not your warrior, has arrived with news. The hunters have been tracking void activity in the city, and it's accelerating. If we're going, it needs to be soon. Percy grabbed a fresh Camp Half-Blood t-shirt and quickly changed. Let's not keep her waiting. They found Talia Grace in the arena, demonstrating archery techniques to some younger campers despite her punk appearance and hunter's garb. Her electric blue eyes, so like her father Zeus's, lit up when she spotted Percy. "Help, head," she called, handing her bow to a nearby camper. "Finally awake, I see." Percy grinned as she approached. "Pinecone face. Heard you've been busy." Talia embraced him briefly, then stepped back to look him over with a critical eye. "Six-dimensional bonds, huh? You never do anything halfway," says the girl who joined an Immortal Hunters Club. Talia smirked, then grew serious. "The Chicago situation is bad, Percy. We've been monitoring it for 12 hours. The construction is almost complete, so, me kind of tower structure in Grant Park. The void creatures have created a mist so thick around it that mortals think it's an art installation." "How heavily defended?" Annabeth asked. "Heavily," Talia confirmed grimly. "At least twice what you described in New Mexico. And they've added some kind of energy barrier that repels divine energy. We can't get close enough for clear reconnaissance." "They're adapting," Percy realized. "Learning from each encounter." "Exactly," Talia agreed. "Which means you need to adapt too. Whatever worked last time won't be enough this time." Percy exchanged glances with Annabeth and Takara. "We need to gather everyone. Time to plan a counter-adaptation." An hour later, they were airborne in 3 of Artemis's silver chariots, streaking eastward toward Chicago. Percy rode in the lead chariot with Annabeth, Takara, and Talia Grace. Behind them, the other dimensional warriors followed in 2 additional vehicles piloted by hunters. Percy had spent he journey briefing Talia on their newest allies and their capabilities. The daughter of Zeus listened attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions about their powers and limitations. "So let me get this straight," she said as they approached the outskirts of Chicago. "You've got Lightning Girl, Fire Lady, Plant Woman, Shadow Walker, Techno Man, and Strategy Gal. Sounds like a superhero team." Percy laughed despite the seriousness of their mission. "Something like that. And the plan is to hit this construction site from multiple angles simultaneously while you use the scroll to disrupt the rift." "That's the basic idea," Percy confirmed, "though we're expecting stronger resistance this time." Talia's expression turned serious. "Percy, these void things, they're unlike anything I've hunted before. Even Lady Artemis is concerned. Whatever they're building in Chicago, it feels wrong on a fundamental level. Like it shouldn't exist in our reality." "It shouldn't," Takara confirmed from her position near the front of the chariot. "Void constructs violate the natural laws of your dimension. They're designed to gradually convert your reality to match void parameters." "Convert our reality," Annabeth repeated. "You mean transform Earth itself?" "Precisely," Takara nodded. "The amplifiers are the first stage, creating stable access points. The conversion structures would follow, gradually expanding outward until the entire realm is void compatible. And then the consuming one arrives for dinner," Percy concluded grimly. "With Earth as the main course." Talia's hand tightened on her spear. "Not happening on my watch." As they approached downtown Chicago, the unnatural mist Talia had mentioned came into view, a swirling darkness that enshrouded Grant Park and the surrounding area. From above, they could see that it formed a perfect circle nearly a mile in diameter, with what appeared to be a massive tower rising from its center. "That's bigger than I expected," Percy admitted, feeling a flutter of apprehension. The tower resembled an obsidian obelisk, but with strange angles and protrusions that hurt the eyes to look at directly. It rose at least 300 feet into the air, its surface rippling with dark energy. At its base, a large rift pulsed with void energy, significantly wider than the one they'd encountered in New Mexico. "Energy barrier begins approximately 500 feet out from the perimeter," reported Krios from the second chariot via their bond connection. "Composition analysis indicates anti-divine properties. Conventional approaches will be rejected." "Can we breach it?" Percy asked. "Uncertain," Krios replied. "The barrier appears designed specifically to counter Olympic energy signatures." Percy considered this new information. "Then we don't use Olympic energy. We use dimensional energy instead." He turned to Takara. "The scroll creates connections between dimensions. Could it open a pathway directly through the barrier?" Takara's eyes widened slightly. "Theoretically, yes. The scroll operates on principles the void understands but cannot directly counter." A dimensional doorway might bypass their defenses entirely. It's risky. Talia of the Nexus realm communicated through the bond. Creating a doorway so close to an existing rift could cause instability. Do we have a better option? Percy challenged. A moment of silence across the bond network. I can calculate the precise coordinates for maximum stability, Talia conceded. But it would require another bond, someone with spatial manipulation abilities to fine-tune the doorway. Percy glanced at Annabeth, who nodded her understanding and support. Then that's what we'll do. One more bond, specifically chosen for this task. Talia Grace frowned. Wait, you're adding another dimensional person. Right now, in midair. No better time than the present, Percy replied with forced lightness. Besides, we need their help to get past that barrier. He withdrew the scroll from his pocket, feeling it pulse with anticipation. The golden symbols on his arm warmed as he unrolled the ancient papyrus. Unlike previous times, the script rearranged itself almost instantly, as though the scroll was learning his intentions faster with each use. By blood and need, the circle grows. Space itself shall bend for those who seek to breach what cannot be passed. The seventh bond shall be the last. Percy raised an eyebrow at the final line. The last? That can't be right. We need 20. Perhaps it means the last for now, Annabeth suggested. Or the last before something changes. Only one way to find out, Percy decided. He drew Riptide and made a small cut on his thumb, then pressed it to the scroll. The effect was immediate but different from previous summonings. Instead of a doorway forming nearby, the air directly in front of the chariot split open, revealing what looked like a tunnel of shifting geometric patterns. From within this tunnel stepped a figure unlike any of the previous warriors. The newcomer appeared to be neither male nor female, their form constantly shifting between states. Their skin as deep blue with geometric patterns that rearranged themselves continuously, and they wore what looked like a spacesuit made of crystal facets. Most disconcerting were their eyes, kaleidoscopic vortex that seemed to see in all directions simultaneously. Summoner, they greeted Percy, their voice harmonic and multi-layered. I am Zephyr of the Tesseract realm. You seek passage through an impassable barrier. Can you help us? Percy asked directly. Zephyr's form shifted again, becoming slightly more feminine in aspect. The barrier exists in three-dimensional space. I exist in more. Such obstacles are trivial. Percy felt the new bond settle into place, the seventh symbol appearing on his arm. To his surprise, instead of increasing the strain, the new connection seemed to stabilize the entire network further, as though Zephyr's spatial abilities naturally organized the dimensional energies. Perfect timing, Annabeth commented, pointing ahead. The barrier had become visible as they approached, a dome of swirling darkness that covered the entire construction site. The hunter's chariots slowed as they neared its edge. What's the plan? Talia Grace asked, eyeing Zephyr with fascination and wariness. Zephyr creates a doorway through the barrier, Percy explained. We enter, split into teams as planned, and take down the tower while I deal with the rift. The barrier will detect our entry, Zephyr warned. Their form shifting again. We will have minimal time before countermeasures activate. Then we move fast, Percy decided. Everyone ready? Affirmative responses echoed through the bond network. Zephyr, do your thing. The spatial warrior raised both hands, which elongated and shifted into impossible geometries. The space before them seemed to fold like paper, creating a tunnel through the barrier itself, not by breaking it, but by bending space around it. Fascinating, Annabeth breathed. They're creating a tesseract pathway, a four-dimensional shortcut through three-dimensional space. Quote, follow precisely, Zephyr instructed. Deviation would be unfortunate. The three chariots entered the tunnel in sequence, passing through what felt like layers of reality folded upon themselves. Percy's stomach lurched as spatial orientation briefly lost meaning, then stabilized as they emerged inside the barrier. They found themselves much closer to the tower than anticipated, perhaps only a quarter mile from its base. The structure was even more imposing up close, its obsidian surface crawling with void entities that resembled worker ants on a massive hive. They haven't spotted us yet, Talia Grace observed. The spatial jump confused their perimeter sensors. Not for long, Creos warned through the bond. Energy surge detected. Defensive systems activating. Deploy now, Percy ordered. The chariots separated, each heading toward a predetermined position around the tower. Percy's chariot landed in a copse of trees that had been twisted into unnatural shapes by void energy, providing momentary cover. Teams form up, he commanded as they disembarked. Execute as planned. His 7-dimensional warriors gathered around him, their diverse energies humming through the bond network. Percy could feel each connection distinctly yet harmoniously, no longer competing for his attention but forming a unified system. You've mastered the network rapidly, Zephyr observed, their kaleidoscopic eyes studying Percy with interest. Most summoners require significant adjustment periods between bonds. I'm a quick study, Percy replied. Especially when the world's at stake. Annabeth and Talia Grace joined them, weapons ready. The tower has 7 levels, Annabeth reported, having studied it through binoculars. The rift is anchored at the base but connected to the peak by what looks like energy conduits. The structure is nearly complete, Takara added. Perhaps 2 hours from activation. Then we have 2 hours to tear it down, Percy said. Teams split as planned. Communicate through the bond network. If anyone encounters something they can't handle, fall back immediately. The group divided according to the IR predetermined strategy. Team Alpha, Percy, Takara, and Zephyr, would target the rift directly. Team Beta, Kenna, Nyx, and Talia Grace, would attack the tower's midpoint to disrupt the energy flow. Team Gamma, Krios, Lina, and Annabeth, would infiltrate the base to sabotage the foundation. Team Delta, Talia of Nexus Realm and the Hunters, would provide ranged support and prevent reinforcements from interfering. As they prepared to move out, Percy felt a familiar tug in his gut, the presence of water nearby. Despite the void corruption affecting the park, the nearby Lake Michigan remained a powerful source he could potentially tap. Remember, he told everyone, these entities have adapted based on our last encounter. Expect new defenses, new tactics. Stay flexible and support each other. With final nods of acknowledgement, the teams separated, moving toward their objectives through the twisted landscape of what had once been a public park. Team Alpha advanced directly toward the rift, using Zephyr's spatial manipulation to fold distances and avoid detection. Percy kept the scroll ready, feeling it respond to the nearby dimensional tear with increasing urgency. The rift is larger than New Mexico, Takara observed quietly as they approached. More stable as well. Can the scroll still close it? Percy asked. Yes, but it will require significantly more power, she replied. LL7 bonds channeling simultaneously. They reached a position approximately 50 yards from the rift, concealed behind a corrupted statue. From this vantage point, Percy could see that the tier, in reality, was at least 30 feet wide and stabilized by what appeared to be obsidian pylons driven into the ground around its perimeter. Those pylons are dimensional anchors, Zephyr explained, their form shifting nervously. They prevent the rift from collapsing naturally. So we take out the pylons first, then seal the rift. Percy suggested. Precisely, Takara agreed, but they'll be heavily defended. As if in response to her words, movement appeared around the rift's perimeter. Void architects stood at regular intervals, their elongated limbs making constant adjustments to the pulsing energy. Between them patrolled hunter-class entities, but these were different from those they'd encountered before, larger, with armored carapaces and what appeared to be weaponized limbs. They've militarized the hunters, Takara noted with concern. Specialized combat variants. Can we handle them? Percy asked. Unknown, Zephyr replied, their kaleidoscopic eyes analyzing the scene. Their dimensional frequency has been altered to resist standard attacks. Adaptation required. Percy considered their options. A direct assault would alert the entire complex immediately. Stealth seemed impossible given the